afternoon. So we appreciate you guys coming out, and welcome to the 2023 season here at Skydive Chicago. Yeah. I am ultra fortunate that I get to work with some of the best people in the industry, and I feel our performance last year definitely shined through about how awesome these human beings are. Most of the people are returning. We do have a couple of new people, but just to run through the list, we have Anthony, of course, is our general manager, Tracey, events. Tracey this winter rocked out the bid for the 2024 Nationals, and we broke the cycle that it was normally on, and we were awarded the 2024 USPA Nationals. So thank you, Tracey. Yeah, awesome job. And because we love events, we also are going to do the Hall of Fame Awards Banquet here in 2024 as well. So that's going to be exciting. We can introduce all the people. Yeah, it's going to be fun. We did it a long, long time ago, so I'm anxious to do it again and always level it up. Danimal, our kick-ass grounds guy. Thank you for coming back, buddy. Donovan, Director of Maintenance. I am as the Chief Pilot. We have a new person this year taking the place of Josh as Kayla Fairchild. I think she's in the room somewhere right there. She's our new Marketing Director. Thank you, Kayla. Yeah, I'm sure she'll be taking a picture of you at some point. The one that's keeping us all connected to the internet, Ian, thank you, brother. I appreciate everything that you do for us. And I'm super excited to introduce you guys, and I don't even think they're up here right now, but Jay and Lynn are the new owners of Prismatic Cafe, and they are wonderful people, and I'm super excited to have them here this season. And they cooked us a Thanksgiving feast just to welcome everybody back. Like, that's the kind of the people that they are, and I'm super stoked to have them take over the cafe. And we've been leaning on Alan a bunch, but they're definitely going to make it their own. As with anything new, feel free to give them some feedback, some advice. They're open to any sort of comments like that. So if there's anything that you think would be awesome or concerns, make sure to mention it to them, and I'm sure they'll look after you guys up until a point. We are only a few weeks away from opening up our brand new 19,000 square foot maintenance facility. That's going to be amazing. Probably the best facility any job zone has ever had. And I promise you that because I have no money in my bank account from that. So if you guys could all put money on your account before you leave, I would really appreciate that. And I could keep the lights on. We have a lot of stuff to talk about tonight, so I don't want to keep talking too much, but I'm going to turn it over to Tracey, our events manager. Thank you.
All right. I'm also not going to go over all the events in super great detail because you can find all of the information at skydiveschicago.com/events. So this is kind of just page one of all the events we have. It's not going to be quite as packed with big events as last year, but I'm hoping to do a lot more like kind of community and campground related events and skills camps. So yeah, and things, so all the events will also be on Facebook. The community and like campground related events like the community cookout, Friday Night Lights, any of those activities will be posted on the Skydive Chicago Jumpers page, not posted on the main SDC page because we have had people from Ottawa come to those events. So in order to keep it kind of with the community, if you're not part of that Skydive Chicago Jumpers group on Facebook, some events that are community-based will be posted on there as opposed to the main page. So, but all others will be posted on the main page if they're not already on there. In the bathroom stalls, or some of them, there's also still a QR code which links to this PDF right here. And yeah, so just kind of highlights of regular repeating activities. So we are having community cookouts again, water training, 8N2 Club. So for those of you who are unfamiliar with 8N2 Club, it is a really good opportunity for jumpers, kind of that A license to 200 jump range. And we give you a local experienced jumper to jump with. It's a really good opportunity to meet people. We're doing night jumps. Alter Ego is coming back to do Canopy courses. We have both silver courses, and then they're also going to be offering the more advanced yellow and orange courses a couple times this year. And Sit Fly Sunday will also be back. Some highlighted other activities that are going to be new. Rook is coming back for 10 spot, so to do some more advanced kind of head down, head up sequential stuff. Core is going to be back. Rhythm is running multiple camps. Ecliptic Angle, so Dan and Leslie will also be back running a lot of angle stuff. USPA courses, so Angie is going to be running coach course, TI courses, AFFI courses. Some kind of new activities. Neil Coleman is coming, and he's doing a handful of free fly camps as well as angle camps. We're also Jason Brigman and his teammate from XP Ascend, who are the free fly world champions. They're coming to do an intro to artistic event. So that is open to even like, as long as you have your license, but lower level jumpers, because there is a new intermediate category for artistic. So anybody who's seen any of those, really cool kind of dynamic moves in the sky, there is a competition for that. And we're doing an intro course here. Or if you're interested in getting into judging, we're offering an artistic judging course as well. So big events that we have. Easter egg hunt is April 9th, so that's next weekend. And we have like 5,000 eggs that need to be stuffed. So tomorrow, when we're enjoying looking at the cool weather outside, not in the air, if anybody wants to come in here, I will be stuffing Easter eggs all day long. If some candy slips into your mouth, that's okay. Cloud games are going to be June 9th to 11th, so that is another good opportunity where there's a few teams that compete here, but we also, we're hosting a remote competition that's worldwide. We have teams from Mexico. We might get a couple teams from Europe this year. So that's a really good opportunity for people to get into competition. If you've never done it, it's a low pressure. You get to compete from home opportunity, and it's not very expensive. So we organize that, but like I said, it is worldwide. So if you have any interest in competition at all, that's a great opportunity to join. Freedom Fest, we have All-American. We have our new team, SDC Matrix, MFS team, and they're going to be running a mixed sequentials event. Ecliptic Angle is also running a camp that weekend. So Freedom Fest, there's a lot of activities of various styles going on. Summerfest is July 29th to August 6th. It's Wizard of Oz themed, and we have over 170 people registered already, so make sure you register. After that, we're doing the Illinois, Doug is organizing the Illinois full break sequential record. The weekend after that, Starved Rock National Car Show, that big car show that comes out. And then Rookie Fest is September 30th to August 1st. So those are kind of the highlights of the bigger events that we're having. But like I said, this year we're really focusing on kind of those community activities and skill building. I'm still looking into getting flocking here so we can work on canopy flocking, both for bigger wings, so a 1.3 wing loading or less. So it doesn't have to be those tiny canopies that are above a 2.0. And then filming, and then also either me or having some other people to work on filming landings. I feel like we do a really good job debriefing and having free fall video, but then not a lot of people have video of their landings. So that way you can kind of debrief that yourself or find a coach to debrief that with. Also talking to some vendors to do demo days on different weekends. So we'll have a PD send us or come out with a whole bunch of different canopies on a particular weekend. So that way you're able to try a different style canopy or anything that you would like. And if you have any ideas or want to help with any of the events or anything like that, just let me know. We're definitely open to suggestions. And 2024, as Rook said, we're hosting nationals, which is very exciting. And then this winter, we also have some international kind of castaway tropical trips in the works. So look out for information on those. That's pretty much it. And now it's going to be Anthony with the Fatality Report.
This one. All right, well, before I get into this, I just want to say welcome to everybody. Thanks for coming out, braving the storms like Rook said. As we were coming up here today, I was getting notifications like all of you about the upcoming disaster that we're going to have. And one of the things was be prepared. And where a storm never happened, that's part of what Safety Day is. We're going to be prepared. Even if nothing happens, which we hope nothing happens on every skydive, you always have to have a plan. So some other stuff, again, it's good to get back in the sky. Yesterday we got all the instructors current. We took advantage of the good weather, and it felt really great to get back in the sky. The way currencies are going to run, again, if you're here, and you haven't jumped in less than a year, your currencies are kind of free. You still have to pay for your 2 slots, but our coaches that are going to be helping us out are donating their time for that. So how that works, you have to sign up. Hopefully, if you need a currency and you're under that year currency or being out of current, go ahead and sign up, and then we're going to meet tomorrow at around 9:30, 10 o'clock. Go in details, a little bit more detail about the currency. Obviously, if the weather's good, then we'll go ahead and jump and get you current. If not, that currency will go into Sunday. If hopefully the weather's good on Sunday, but if it isn't and you're there, we will extend it to the following weekend for that. So if you guys have any questions about how those currencies are going to work, just come find me and I'll let you know. All right. Okay, so yeah, this is the 2022 Fatality Report. So how this information is getting, the USPA compiles all the numbers, and then they present this every single year. It's good that they do stuff like this because I'm kind of jumping ahead, but if they see trends starting to happen, a lot of times they will start programs in order to stop those trends. For instance, if you heard, don't delay, cut away. I think the other one was fly like your life depends on it. All those little programs, they've been able to do it because they collect data, they see the trends, and then they put it out to the drop zones. So an overview of what we're going to do, we're going to have a small group discussion about safety locally at this drop zone. We'll go over the fatalities by category, average category fatalities by decade, go over the fatality index and how that works. We're going to talk about low turns because unfortunately they were pretty high in 2022. Fatalities by license. I'm going to briefly go over the tandem industry. Unfortunately, there was way too many in the tandem industry. I won't. That's going to be more for on the tandem side of things, but it is part of the presentation. And then another thing they did a little bit differently is they reviewed and categorized it by human error rather than just what happened in a skydive. So this is just a quick, I don't have a whiteboard or anything like that, but from what happened, if you were here last year, what incidences that you can think of, you think is a concern here at Skydive Chicago? Not everybody go at once. All right. Well, I'll go just some of the things we had. We did have a canopy collision last year due to movement groups. One of the ways we did that, we refined our movement group rules that we have here. Whether you like it or not, that's what we did to try to curb those types of situations with that. And as the year goes, it's really important that if you see particular issues going on, that if you see something, you say something. All right? We may not move immediately on that, but I have my own little database of things that are going on that we can keep note of, and then we can make the changes as you go. So again, it's just a good reminder. If you see something, whatever small thing it might be, please say something immediately with that. All right? Does anybody else, have you thought of anything that you guys want to talk about? Or? All right, again, I'm going to go in more detail when we break into groups. So this is fatalities by category. So again, we had one medical problem, one low deployment, 2 low cutaways, 2 equipment problems, 2 emergency procedures, 2 landing problems, 2 unintentional low turns, and 2 intentional low turns. So to define what the difference between that, unintentional is obviously, usually they're trying to avoid an object or they kind of panic. And intentional is usually they're doing a high performance landing. So this is just the 10-year averages over the last 60 years. So we're heading in the right direction, obviously. 10-year average was 42 fatalities versus only 13.7 in the 2020 so far. Up until 2020, 2021, and 20 and 2021, they were uber low. Like, if I remember, there was only like 10 or 11 fatalities per year. Unfortunately, that downward trend kind of stopped this past year when we had a total of 20 fatalities nationwide. Okay, so this is the fatality index. How this, well, unfortunately, you can't really see those, but the trend's going in a positive direction. But those orange, the orange bars there is the amount of jumps that are happening nationwide and estimated. The blue bar is the amount of fatalities that are happening. So as you can see, even though the amount of fatalities happening is decreasing, while our number of jumps is growing exponentially, all right? So that's how they determine what our fatality index is. And unfortunately, you can't really see it here, but you can see the first numbers in the 60s. It was 5 point something of a fatality index. And now in the 2010s, it was 0.6. So we are heading in the correct direction. So even though we're doing more skydives, there's less fatalities. So this is basically just another graph stating what I just talked about. So yeah, one fatality every 9,000 skydives in 1961 versus one fatality every 161,000 skydives, and that's in 2021. All right, so this is just a comparison of the different like the way we categorize what actually happened on that skydive, and the 2022 fatalities versus the last 2 decades or so. So if you can see medical problem, there was a slight increase, but not a lot. There is a like a 5% deviation here. So the 8.8 and 5 really isn't that big of a difference. A little bit lower for low deployments. Low cutaway was a little bit lower also. Equipment problem was about the same at 10. Incorrect EPs, again, about the same. Same with landing problems and unintentional low turns. The big one that is the biggest concern, at least nationwide, is the intentional low turns. As you can see, 40% of the fatalities versus what the 2 decades average was 15.5% of the fatalities. We're going to go to a little bit more. Unfortunately, part of the reason why that's so high was 3 of the intentional low turns had to do to tandem fatalities. So this is just another graph showing intentional low turns. This is a growing problem nationwide. You can see it's increasing. They just put this graph in here to try to determine, because if you look, sorry, I'm going to go back. It did increase quite a bit in 2022. You can see that last little peak going up there. But if you take away the tandem fatalities, it does lower it a little bit, but it's still above the growing average that is happening. We're going to talk more about that when Baxter's going to talk more about it when it comes to the Canopy course. But it's super important that if you're downsizing or starting to do any aggressive turns, that you get the proper coaching involved, okay? We have grown past the days where we just wing it and try to figure it out. There are courses that you need to go through in order to do those types of maneuvers. And Tracey talked about, we've got Ultra Ego coming out, got quite a few courses that are happening, and if there is a strong demand, we will put more courses on the schedule if need be. But again, Baxter talk about it. It's very, very important that if you are thinking about doing high performance turns, that you get the proper education and coaching along with it. So by license, this hasn't changed a whole lot. Unfortunately, the D license always makes up the greater amount of the fatalities for that. There's a couple different reasoning for that. One, with the D license, they're the ones that do a majority of the skydives. Another one is, to be perfectly honest, a lot of D license holders, that's when you get the most complacent. Because you think you know everything and you stop learning. You know, you're still progressing with your A, B, and C license. You're still a little bit nervous and scared, which is okay. Being nervous and scared will help keep you alive. Then you get to D license, you think you know everything, and that's when mistakes happen. So this trend, this is pretty much normal throughout the years. There was a few more student fatalities, but the reasoning why that is much higher than the average was they count the 3 tandem students that died in that block. So you take away those tandem fatalities, you have that. And unfortunately, when it comes to tandem fatalities, in many cases, the instructor, especially on a low turn, the instructor will end up living while the student takes the blunt of the impact. Cool. I'm going to just briefly go into this because this is more on tandem fatalities. There's been 46 tandem fatalities in the U.S. since 1998. There's not really a trend. They go up and down throughout the years. This is just showing the fact that majority of them are due to landing problems. And unfortunately, when you look at, because there is 2 people per accident, the student is significantly higher than the instructor. But that's something that's a problem nationwide. I am very proud of the tandem team that we have here. A lot of these are low turns, and if you guys travel and see other tandem instructors and how low they do their turns, and you know when you come here and see our tandems, we do not make those low turns at all. We actually, so the USPA has, it's a BSR, that you can't do anything over 90 degrees under 500 feet. Here at Skydive Chicago, we've taken it another step further. So we have a rule, we call it the 3-second rule. So when you have to be able to be in full flight for a minimum of 3 seconds before you can start your actual landing of that. Obviously, if you are low, you need a flare to get out of it. But if an instructor is consistently basically stabbing out of it to save their life or to land, it's too low and we don't allow it. So I pride the fact that we have all those extra rules. And if you are traveling and you see unsafe behavior with instructors flying in those conditions, it is, say something, okay? Because every fatality is horrible for the sport, but especially tandem fatalities are horrible for the sport because they really they can't make those decisions. They're at the mercy of the instructor. So again, in years past, they haven't presented this in the Fatality Report, but unfortunately in 2022, it was an enormous problem, like I said, in the industry, not here at Skydive Chicago. I can safely say we had 0 tandem accidents last year. And actually over the last quite a few years, we've only had like 1 broken ankle in probably around 60 or 70,000 tandem jumps. So it's really good stats here at Skydive Chicago. But in the end, nationwide, this is the tandem fatality index. It is going lower and lower. So it's 1 in 263,000. So again, this slide was already up there once. This is how we categorize a lot of the fatalities in the past. The one thing that they're doing a little bit different this year is instead of categorizing it as these particular things, it's instead of why it happened, what happened. Okay, what was the malfunction that happened in that person making the decisions at the last moment? And they've broke it down into 3 sections. So cognitive bias is basically, I'm thinking that I'm doing the right thing, but I'm not. I have bad information. Ego plays a little bit in a cognitive bias. They think they're doing the right thing. They think they have the experience, but they don't. Fight, flight, or freeze is basically panicky. All right. They know the answer, but their brain shuts off and they make bad decisions, which ultimately led to the person's demise. And poor decisions is exactly what it is. It's somebody doing something stupid. They know it's stupid, everybody else knows it's stupid, and they ended up killing themselves when they're there. In the presentation, Ron Bellman, it's the hold my beer, watch this clause. So that's the way they categorized how we're going to the individual fatalities. One side note, though, when you categorize it like this, there's a lot of fatalities that are going to be kind of wishy-washy. They're going to go into multiple categories. For instance, like an intentional low turn can be in cognitive bias. They could be thinking that they're making wise decisions, but in the process of making that wise decision, they put themselves in a bad decision, and they panic, which end up causing their demise. Or another example for intentional low turns. So again, people thinking they're getting correct decision from a particular person on the drop zone, and then they make that's also can be a poor decision when they're doing an intentional low turn. So again, when I was reading through all these fatalities, you can see where they can actually be in multiple categories. So at this point in there, I actually kind of go through each fatality and we talk a little bit about each one. So as far as the poor decisions, they categorize for 6 fatalities were due to poor decisions. I get it. The first fatality, and again, I really wouldn't consider this a poor decision, maybe the cognitive bias, but what happened was they had a medical issue. This person had recently broken their ankle. They never gave a certain amount of time that they were on the ground for, but they decided to do hop a pop. They were getting back into the sport. Everything opened up fine. Witnesses said that the person went limp and then ended up landing on the ground, and they were pronounced dead at the scene. After an autopsy, it realized that they had a blood clot in their ankle from the surgery that they had recently had. Between the opening shock and the altitude is what released that blood clot, and they obviously had a stroke underneath the canopy. All right. So with that, if you have any medical issues that may be happening, maybe you had just recently had surgery, you need to keep that in mind. Out of the 10 years I've been doing a fatality report, I've never heard of a situation like that. But again, I really wouldn't consider that's a poor decision on that, but now that you guys have heard that, if you have surgery, maybe wait a little bit longer. So, and then the other 4 ones were intentional low turns. 3 of those were by tandem instructors. And the other one was kind of an equipment problem. So what happened was this particular person had some history of a leg strap that was not tightening correctly. So he over tightened the other leg strap and then continued to do his normal turn. When he got down there, one was extremely loose, the other one wasn't, and that shift in your harness, he impacted the ground. Okay. So one thing, if you are doing high performance, if you have problems with your equipment like a loose leg strap, you need to get it checked out immediately. That exasperates itself if you're flying a high performance canopy. If you're flying anything at like a 2.0, you will understand that just a small little leaning one way or the other can send you on a turn. So again, if you have equipment that needs to be checked out, you need to do that immediately. So some tips to avoid making poor decisions. Obviously, seek good information. It says avoid common pitfalls. So what you can do like that is look at the fatality reports, learn from other people's mistakes before you make the mistake on your own, and also look at your own history. All right. Again, I've changed things that I've done in the past because I've just sat there and looked and like, does this make sense? I'll go more into that. I have a personal example in the EP section, but you should always be looking at what you do, no matter how many jumps you have under your belt, and seeing if it's still the correct way. All right, so the next category is the fight, flight, or freeze. And this makes up a majority of the fatalities that happened last year. Kind of 1, 2. They consider it was 8 fatalities due to basically panicking. So to go through those. Sorry, the cursor is not showing up on my screen. So oh, there it is. Sorry. So one of them was an intentional low turn. This person was coming in on their landing. They were high in their pattern, and they were going to overshoot. So instead of going straight and landing straight in front of them, there was no obstacles in front of them. They did a low 360 turn and impacted the ground. You know, when I read this particular fatality, I see it, obviously the outcomes were different, but I see it all the time. People are coming in for a south landing. They're going to go long, and they do some erratic maneuvers because they think they're going to land in a cornfield or anything. Here at Skydive Chicago, we're blessed with nearly 60 acres that you can land in, and then we're surrounded by corn and soybeans, all right? So if you're overextending or you're going to overshoot, as long as there's nothing hard in front of you, just keep going with it. You know, there's no reason to put yourself in danger when it comes to something like that. But obviously with this person, they froze up and they made some wrong decisions. This one was a low deployment. So this particular one, I would actually categorize it more into poor decisions based on the fact that he had, in the report, they had a history of polling low. So this person pulled low. They set it around 2,000 feet. He was under the saddle. He then had a bag lock and then pulled out of order, which caused a whole mess, and he impacted the ground before any line stretch or anything like that. So again, yes, he was low, and he probably froze up due to that. But again, you could have pulled. He had a history of pulling low, so you need to definitely make sure you're pulling at a little higher altitude. That way, you're not in a panic situation when it comes to it. We had 2 low cutaway and reserve deployments. Again, both of these people, they had a malfunction, and then one particular person waited 32 seconds before they did anything, and then cut away at 200 feet. And the other one was a similar thing. They pulled at approximately 800 feet and then cut away even lower than that. So both those situations, well, one they pulled low, but the other one is they waited way too long under a malfunctioning canopy to respond to it. Hence the don't delay, cut away. We need to be, if you have a malfunction, you don't have a lot of time to deal with it. If it's not working, you need to cut away and pull the reserve. This other one was a student. They considered a landing problem. So unfortunately, this person was, it was an AED of activation after obviously their jump didn't go very well. The person then landed in a tree and managed to get themselves to the stump. The instructor then went to go get help. When they came back, she had tried to get down and fallen out of the tree and then died from the injuries from falling out of the tree. Unfortunately, this is not the first accident that happened this way. So we'll go over the canopy emergencies. If you land in a tree and you're on a branch that's nice and safe, just stay there, all right? We'll get the proper emergency procedure professionals out here to come get you down. It kind of reminded me of an incident that happened years ago. Somebody landed in a tree across the river, actually found that person, and she was adamant that she would be fine if she just jumped. But she was about 30 feet in the air. I knew it wasn't going to be fine. So just be aware of that. Even if you're in a tree, you might not be able to know the depth of where you're at. Your adrenaline's going to be high. You're going to be pumped because you just landed in a tree. So if you're safely in a tree, just stay put until we get the proper authorities to come get you. But again, that was probably a panic situation that led her into that. There was no pull. There was nothing. From the report, she was just spinning out of the control and free fall before the AED activated. So this one was, again, somebody was downsizing, and they were learning how to swoop, and they had just gotten onto another canopy. They did their turn, but she basically flared with her fronts. and it was probably a nervous reaction. She still hadn't gotten to the point of being able to, do your turn on your fronts and then go to your rears or your toggles. She saw the ground coming. We're assuming she saw the ground coming up and immediately just froze up and double front into the ground. Again, this has happened in personal experience. I was down at another drop zone, and somebody basically did the exact same thing. They did their turn, they were low, they freaked out, and they continued to pull down on their fronts before they impacted on the ground. So again, it's one of those things, if you are downsizing, you need to take proper education for all that. All right, so this was another tandem incident. This particular jumper, again, it was a series of events that led to it. They pulled low. They pulled at 4,000 feet for a tandem. We're supposed to pull at 5,000 feet. Pulled at 4,000 feet. They then had a bag lock, which is a complicated malfunction for just normal, but it's much more complicated for a tandem system. And then from the report, they either pulled out of sequence or pulled at the same time. One of the not to know the tandem system, but in a bag lock situation on a tandem, cutting away usually doesn't have enough drag for the 3 rings to be released. So instructors will cut away thinking they fully did it, but the 3 rings will still be connected, and they'll pull the reserve and they'll dump the reserve into their bag lock that they have. So in this situation, there was an entanglement. The reserve line then got wrapped over the reserve, and then he spun it. The instructor perished, but the student managed to live with some injuries. So again, if they would have bumped everything up, pulled up 5,000 feet, that level of panic wouldn't have been so high in a high stress situation such as a bag lock. So, and the last one for the panics, the fight, flight, or freeze. This particular jumper opened up. It was a normal skydive. They had issues with their slider, and they spent an absorbent amount of time trying to fix their slider, and they weren't able to get it rectified. And then they pulled down on a toggle got loose at a low altitude. This person was jumping a very high performance canopy, which as soon as that toggle was loosed up, they ended up spinning to the ground. So again, it was in a situation where there was a lot of stuff going on. Some simple maneuvers like bestowing the other brake, or realizing that your slider isn't really necessary, having a removable slider isn't necessary to land a parachute safety. And then it was more like a panic situation that led to the demise of that. So again, that took up a majority of the fatalities, that fight, flight, or freeze. I'm going to talk more about it in the EPs on how to reduce that, because many of these people were delicensed. They were very experienced. They should have known, or that they know to not panic. All right, but for whatever reason they did, and just because that happened to them doesn't mean it can't happen to us. All right. Again, I'm going to go more about it with the EPs later on. So some tips to avoid the flight, fight, freeze. Take breaths and check your altitude. My emergency procedures is when I cut away, I take a breath prior to going to my reserve. Especially if you have a MARD or RSL, man, most of the time you're here and your reserve's already open. But giving yourself that extra 2 seconds will allow that main to separate. Pay attention to the physical sensations that you're experiencing, and also try to relaxation techniques to help yourself stay calm and present. Another thing, if that particular day that you're jumping, you're a little bit high-strung about whatever's going on in your life, will this affect my decision making if something goes wrong? You should ask yourself those situations in order to avoid that panic situation. So the last one is cognitive bias. So basically, these people got wrong information. One was an intentional low turn, one was an unintentional low turn, and one was an equipment problem. So this one, the person had just gotten current. They were going to go long again on their landing, and they went in quarter breaks. The wind conditions for that day was not good for them to go on quarter breaks. It was a bit turbulent. Obviously, we know when it's turbulent, what do? Hands all the way up. You want to go in full flight. So they were in quarter breaks. The turbulence blew them off course a little bit. They were going to go into the bushes, and they did a low turn to avoid going into the bushes. So they categorized as a cognitive bias just because they thought they were doing the right thing when they obviously should have been in full flight. So the next four are all high intentional. Were all high performance jumps. One was in a comp situation, and they impacted the ground. They did a too low of a turn. The other one was in a canopy course, actually, and the other one it was a very experienced person, but they just made too low of a turn. They were doing a 270 high performance turn. So one thing that what probably led to all the intentional low turn deaths is just overconfidence. They call it overconfidence bias. And this, when you hold a false idea about your level of talent, your intellect, or skills, like, oh, I've got this. I've done this 100, 200, 300 times. I'll be just fine. That overconfidence can obviously turn into something deadly. So you should always have humility about what you have, your experience, and always be questioning if you're doing things the correct way. Okay, and this last one, it's a bit of an equipment problem. They opened up in line twist. They were able to clear it, and then they realized that they had a step through. At that point, they made a decision to land the parachute with a step through. At around 800 feet, for whatever reason, they dislodged a toggle, which then obviously caused them to spin into the ground. So again, you may have heard from other people that you can land a step through. If you're not able, and we'll go more about this later, but if you're not able to do a controllability check, that parachute is not going to get you down to the ground safely. Just because somebody else was able to land a step through and got lucky doesn't mean that there could be other situations that may arise in a process of you opening up to the ground. Okay, so you have to do a full controllability check before to make that decision whether or not you're going to cut away or pull the reserve. So some tips to overcome that. Obviously, be aware. Consider current factors that may be influencing your decision. Again, who you're listening to. Strive for that growth mindset and practice intellectual humility. All right, so when you break it down, again, versus not what happened, but why it happened, 30% was cognitive bias, 40% was fight, flight, or freeze, and 30% was poor decisions. So with these statistics, obviously we should be learning about everything, but how do we overcome that panic situation? I'm going to talk more about it in my presentation when we split up into groups, but kind of keep that in your mind when you're going through the different stations. How do you avoid panicking in high stress situations? All right. And then here's some there. Overcoming cognitive bias. Be aware. Fight, flight, or freeze. Recognize that you're in a high stress situation and learn how to manage your stress in those situations. And overcoming poor decisions. One of the things with overcoming poor decisions is sometimes that jumper may not see it, so it's a responsibility as a community to kind of step in and help those people that are making poor decisions. All right, moving on. So finally, the fatality index for 2022 was 0.62, or there's one fatality, 1 in 161,000 jumps. Again, it's not as good as last year. Last 2 years we had a very low fatality rate. It did creep up this year, and our goal with these seminars right here and throughout the entire year is that we can get back to those well, hopefully we can get to 0. That's really the goal. But as long as we can continue that downward trend. All right. So now that fun's over, what we're going to do is we're going to break up into 3 different groups, and then we're going to go over canopy skills, aircraft emergencies, your gear, and emergency procedures. So, do you have those slips or?
Yep. Just split them up and then I'll make it.
Okay. So I'm going to give you a minute to get next to your friends so you can stay with them. All right. And then I'm going to split you guys up. All right. So don't talk too loud. I want to scream. So if you're on this side over here, we'll say, Bob, you're the dividing line. So everyone that's over here, you're going to go to
The hangar first.
the hangar for aircraft emergencies, okay? And then we need one group leader, so you'll go next to Tracey.
Animal is your group leader. Follow him to the hangar.
All right. Second group, that's everybody in the couch. Everybody at the table. Tammy. What? Oh. Yeah, I'm close. Hey, Josh Rook. Josh Rook.
Josh, raise your hand.
All right, so from Josh on over, you guys are going to be in group 2.
We're going upstairs VIP room. And Kayla's going to be your leader.
Pressure's on now. 2 live audiences. Good. Good enough. Okay. Whoa. Whoa. I know we've known each other for a while, but yeah. The mics are always on. Is that better? Okay. It's all about safety. Okay, let me get my notes. All right, so I'm just going to run through the checklist just because, yeah, we're going to do that. What is the number one thing that needs to be done in case of an aircraft emergency?
Stay calm.
Panic, right? We just had that very uplifting seminar from Anthony about panicking and how awesome you perform when you panic. I like to say nobody ever panic and then stuck it, right? They usually panic and then they mess up and then you're on that report. First thing, stay calm. I think somebody mentioned it, right? Stay calm. Good. Identify what's going on. What's the next thing you should be doing? Okay. What would another good thing to be doing while you're waiting to hear from the pilot? Check your altitude, right? How high are we? Are we at deployment altitude? Are we reserve altitude? Are we crash with the airplane altitude? Freaking out or yelling does not help anything. Ask yourself a few questions. What altitude am I at? Is the plane flying straight and level? Is the plan mission a control surface? Is the plan mission missing a control? Is the plane missing a control surface? Is it on fire? Is the engine working? And know that a twin otter can climb and maintain altitude with one engine. So if an engine quits, it's not like it's going to fall out of the sky. Okay? Now, if the engine quits on this, you're eventually going to fall out of the sky. The wings are what keeps it in the air. Obviously, you guys know that. So just because an engine quit doesn't mean it just automatically falls out of the sky. All right? Also, what a pilot could be doing is asking you for information, right? It's real easy in the caravans to see in front of us if it's on fire or what's going on, if it's blowing a bunch of oil. But in the Twin Otters, the engines are kind of behind us. So we may be looking to you guys for a little guidance. Is it on fire? What's going on? Remember, calm, clear communication is key in an emergency. What is the chain of command in an aircraft emergency? The pilot to an instructor, the pilot instructor to the student. What is the chain of command in an aircraft emergency? The pilot, instructor, student, pilot, PIC, door. Basically, we need to go from the pilot will give commands back to the jumpers. If the pilot asks a question, one jumper needs to relay that back up to the pilot, and then he's either going to tell you to jump or fasten your seatbelt. If he tells you to fasten your seatbelt, you're probably low enough that your seatbelt should still already be on, and then bracing for an impact. I have a saying that I never want to die, and that story embarrassed my mother, right? I don't want that to happen. She raised me well, and I don't want to have that story disappoint her. So I'm a big fan of wearing my helmet. I wear it all the time, mostly because I just don't want to carry it, but also because I know that in an emergency, I want to have it on my head, because what I don't want to do is crash with it in my lap. So I actually just wear it the entire time. Because in our airplanes, there's not a real good place to put it. You know what I mean? You either put it in your lap and it's kind of leaning against the guy in front of you, or you put it on the side. There's just really not a good place. I just wear it all the time. And that way, A, I'm ready, and then B, I'm ready. And I don't embarrass my mother, which is important to me. No, in most of the Twin Otters and the Skyvans, we have the PA system, so you may get instructions from the PA system. More than likely, it's going to be a verbal instruction coming back from the pilot, but know that is a possibility that PA speaker could be the source of information coming back. Let's talk about other importances in the airplane. Actually, no, let's talk about exiting the airplane. Below 1,000 feet, more than likely we're going to have you stay in the airplane, right? Unless the airplane is in imminent danger and we want to get you guys out, we think you have a better chance. 1,000 feet, we're going to come down. 1,000 to 2,500 feet, what are you going to do? Good. Man, you guys are on it. 2,500 feet and above? Man, good. Cool. One thing to note is that you can complicate the situation. Meaning, if you panic and you jump out the door and pitch immediately, what could happen? Especially in the caravan, right? That tail is right there. Those of you that were around last year, we had somebody who's had a deployment as they were crawling out of the airplane and went over the top of the otter tail. So remember, even though it's a panic situation, remain calm, clear the door, and then pull, right? You're not saving any altitude by throwing your pilot chute back in the door as you leave, okay? We're not going to hang on to it and static line you out the door. Cool. If you have to land out, it's always good to land with your friends, right? I like to say the saying, you know, die alone, live together. If there's a bunch of people landing out, like maybe land together. Unless that person made a terrible decision and is going to land somewhere like in the trees, then, you know, obviously don't follow them, and question why you're friends with them when you get back to the landing area. Any questions about emergencies? No?
What happened to that jumper whose chute went over the...
Great question.
Cut away, right?
Yeah, great question. So what happened is it went over the tail, he went under the tail, and then the plane pitched up, and by some miracle, that motion brought him back underneath the tail as the parachute inflated and got him up and over and around the tail. Yeah, it was incredible. Absolutely incredible. There's a video of it too. Amazing. And literally, he had a sore shoulder, and that was it. It was amazing. Yeah, of course. There was another instance of an old pilot that we had who had a person get wrapped over the tail and got stuck on the tail of a twin otter, and eventually cut away, and he was a ball of a mess, and he ended up, you know, streamering into the ground. Not a good story, but the concern was he was the only person in the airplane, so the pilot couldn't recognize what was going on other than the fact that the airplane was flying really, really weird. You know what I mean? So like there's those situations too where the communication is very limited. So whatever you can do to, I mean, like we can't help you if we don't know you're stuck on the tail, right? So, you know, avoiding trying to get in that situation is absolutely key.
Was that the one with Woody?
That was the one with Woody, yeah. That happened in Dubai.
Was that an otter?
That was an otter. Yeah. Incredible, right? And it's happened several times. Those are just the ones that were more intimate to us because it was people in our network.
And that was on just a jump run, right? At altitude?
Which one?
The one with Woody.
The one with Woody. I don't remember exactly how it happened, but it was definitely people were getting out, and then he went over the tail. But he was like,
it wasn't accidentally climbing.
no. And the one that happened here was on jump run, and he had climbed out, and you can clearly see in the video his pilot chute's about that far out of his BOC. And when he crawled out in this manner, and then you can see it leaving him in the video, and then it takes him off the door. Happens quick, right? But again, get yourself out of that situation. Handle checks, good idea, right? In our airplanes, the doors need to stay shut until 2,000 feet. That way the tandems can situate themselves before we open the door. I know on a hot day that's terrible, but it is what it is, right? Keep your helmet on as well. Please don't slam the door. The guys hate making them, and they're a pain in the ass to make, so don't slam the door. Question?
So is that 2,000 flat always? Because I know that if there's no tandems on previous seasons,
You are correct, yeah. Yeah, if there's no tandems on the airplane, you have confirmation that you can open it up at 1,000 feet, but know that if there's any tandems, which is more than likely every single load here, keep the door shut till 2,000 feet. Please do not use your feet to open the door. It has a tendency to take them off of these tracks right here, and we've lost a handful of doors of people being lazy and pushing it up with their feet because you don't push up as much as you're pushing out. The door flexes, it falls out of the track, and then leaves the airplane shortly after. And then some old lady's got to be like, what is that? So please don't use your feet to open the door. So let's talk about moving groups because it's a hot topic and it's important that we know the architecture of the moving group. I think it says show slide, but obviously we can't show the slide. So I think there might be some paperwork referencing it. No. Okay, so the idea with movement groups is that you cannot, at Skydive Chicago, lead yourself on a movement group without an approved leader. Does that make sense? So you can't show up here and do a movement group with you and your buddies without an approved leader. There is a process to be approved, and we encourage you to get approved because you're just safer in that manner. But if you're going to do a movement group here, you have to do it with a leader. Any questions?
How does that apply to wingsuiters?
Yes. How did we say that with wingsuiters?
We didn't.
We didn't. Yeah. So the wingsuiters.
The wingsuiters are usually the last one to leave the plane, so they're not as likely to, like, they're not going to likely run into another group.
Correct.
That's the main concern with an angle group.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Just land on the airport. That's all I ask. Yeah.
Movement group? I don't know that's right.
Yeah, welcome back to the sport. So the movement group is people that are doing tracking jumps, angles, which is just that, angling the whole way down, flocking, whatever you want to call it, Atmanati. It's called angles now. It's been called, like, probably when you were jumping, maybe flocking. Does that ring a bell? Atmanati? Tracking, right? Tracking jump. Atmanati, yeah. It's just like whoever's doing it calls it something different. So we are doing the first movement group. We're a maximum of 2 movement groups per airplane. The very first one is going to be the first one out of the airplane, and the second one we're putting second. Yep. And the leaders will know which way they're going to go because they're going to communicate to each other, and they're going to go opposite directions, and then we're going to have all this guy we want to deal with. All right. At Skydive Chicago, we do a lot of hooks, meaning like the jump run can get long, especially when there's all those tandems on board, and we start hooking back around. And this is written on the info board, whether we hook left or hook right, how far past we're going to hook. Know that it's going to be 0.4 off the line as the airplane turns back around to the downwind side. More than likely, we won't encompass the entire jump run on the way back down, but that's the goal, is to get the movement groups out first, let them play over here. So even if we're doing a hook, the hook is still kind of way over here, and more than likely those people are falling straight down because they're tandems, and they're going to pull at $5,000, which is going to give us the most separation that we can possibly do. Cool. I know the wingers, you guys just want us to keep going out to like the next county, and then you're going to land out. Okay, so airplane procedures. Sorry, let's keep going. Then the next thing is going to be the 2 movement groups first. The next thing is going to be RW, big to small. Okay. Free fly, big to small, our students, our tandems, and then our wingers. Cool? Questions? Awesome. Yep.
So sometimes there's been confusion about, like, when people are, say, doing campfires, are they a belly group or are they a free fly group?
Yeah, it's a good question. Man, I feel like we're splitting hairs on this type of stuff, only because, like, how long are you going to do the belly portion? What altitude are you going to do that? And, like, it would be perfect if we could have somebody down there to do the calculations every single time. It's not realistic.
Is the campfire going to blow up after 1 second?
Yeah, I mean, there's all those great questions, right? I would put them in the free fly realm, because even if they do a campfire for a little bit, they're still going to be falling faster than someone that's doing belly for the entire time. Make sense?
Okay.
So campfires are considered free flyers technically.
Okay.
Beginner free flyers. Cool. Make sure you get to the boarding area by a 5-minute call. We all know Krista. She gets upset when you're not down there. And that way we can kind of figure out the exit order too, right? We want to keep the airplanes efficient, keep jumps tickets as low as possible. Fuel's expensive now. Airplane costs are expensive. So the less we can waste time and money, it all kind of trickles down. Get to the loading area by a 5-minute call. Sort your loading area out. Be vocal. We all know that we've been to the loading area and everybody kind of looks at each other like a high school dance, like, where's it going? Plane's here. And then we all run to the airplane, right? Be vocal. It's not a high school dance. It's all, in the essence of safety. Talk to each other and figure out where you guys need to be in the exit order. Make sure your gear is fully on. Don't come run into the airplane with your chest strap off, your leg strap loose. Make sure you're fully geared. You're not going to get on the airplane. Make part of your gear check your gear tag. As you guys know, we're pretty on it when it comes to gear checks here. And I've been kicked off the airplane for not having one. Haven't really figured out why, but I have, because it was Krista. She got all German on me, and I was like, okay. So make sure that's part of your gear check, right? Check your pins, check everything, check your tag. In the Otters, it's 2 rows of 10, 2 people in the back. Simple, right? You all shake your heads. I promise you. I fly a lot. I see what goes on back there. But it's real easy. If there's no room right here, sorry, this is Caravan, but if you're in the Otter, if there's no room where you're supposed to sit, count, and there should be 9 people, and then you're the 10th potentially. But that's the easy way to do it. 2 in the back, 2 rows of 10, 22. Entering the airplane. Okay. Yeah, we do 12. 12 in here. Right now, the seats are forward, so there's only 11 because there's not enough seatbelt because the seats turn around. So, it's encouraged that you jump with your phone, but please have your phone stored till 1,000 feet. We want you to be paying attention to what's going on. If that happens, emergencies are going to happen quick. We don't need you to be dicking with your phone, right? you can Instagram once you get on the ground. You totally crashed the plane. After 1,000 feet, you can Candy Crush away. That's my notes say. Helmets, don't sit on the door. Exit where we talked about. How am I doing on time? Okay.
5 minutes till 5 minute warning. You got 10 minutes.
Okay. All right, so one of the problems that we had a lot as a team when we trained on core is that we would get out first often because we have little parachutes, and if the jump run ground speed was relatively fast and we had a longer jump run, so we were encompassing maybe a mile of jump run before we would do a hook or anything, and we would get out first, and oftentimes we were a little bit short and we'd have to come back to the drop zone. Now, what hazards does that create?
Canopy collisions with
Yep.
the group that came in.
Exactly. So if you're jumping first and the airport is still this way, so essentially you're kind of downwind, it's critical that you identify where the next group is before you fly up the line of flight, right? Like we would always have a rule that we'd 45 out, and then we'd see the people, he usually was rhythm, and we'd see them open, and then we would kind of like go around them, and then we'd come in for landing. So know that if you're downwind of your target, and you got to fly up the jump run, just like on a tracking jump or a movement group, like there's those hazards exist from the top to the bottom.
And that's to a degree every time you're getting out before the drop zone. Right?
Correct.
And the farther, the more before you get,
The more prevalent that
the more
is.
problem it is.
Exactly. Yeah, and especially team jumping, man, it happens all the time. A little secret, like when we know teams are on, like we actually back the spot up because you take forever to get out, and then, then it kind of all equates out.
Also be aware if you're tracking up jump run because you might be in a bigger group. So if you're in a smaller group, don't track up jump run. But if you have 6+ people and everybody needs to turn 180 degrees from the center, someone's likely going to be tracking up jump run. So be aware if you're that person because you're going to extra hope the people behind you left you 1.5 times at least the exit like separation. But then also, make sure you're doing 90 degrees to jump run when you open up under canopy pretty much immediately, so that way that other group is not running into you.
I'd like to ask a question about that. So if you know that you're that person tracking up jump run, you said like not
When
to
you-
track as hard and hope that
You still want to get away from your group, that's your primary, and like you're assuming that the people behind you left you enough separation. However, as soon as you open up under canopy, make sure that you are not going up jump
Okay.
run, like extra aware.
Yeah.
Yeah. Along those lines, too, is be situationally aware of what's on the airplane, right? Is it a bunch of tandems and me? Then I got the whole sky to myself, right? If is it 22 solos? Bummer, like be aware of what's on your group and especially what's getting out in front of you, what's getting out after you. And it all starts with the loading area. And that's why we're asking you guys to be there before the plane gets there so that way we can sort that stuff out. As you know, we don't make calls here, so all the calls are happening on verbal, whether it's on your phone, whether it's on one of the 400 TVs that we have here. Don't be expecting to hear calls because we don't do them anymore. It's glorious too.
And I think if there's students on the plane, aren't they instructed to just immediately turn your heading towards the landing area and just go?
Correct. However, the students are opening high. They're upwind of the target. So the likelihood of them reaching the people that are downwind is kind of not so much, right? Because they should be opening below them and not be conflict.
And see, like what Tracey's saying makes sense, and you can say, yeah, that's the way we do it, because if you're real experienced, you know if you're tracking up jump run, and you're also probably tracking a long ways. If you're a student and you don't really know which way you're going, probably not going far enough to matter.
Maybe even in a circle,
Well, yeah, right. If you're thinking, man, I don't even know which way I'm tracking, you're probably not going to be tracking far enough to matter to change the separation.
Yep. Are you guys familiar with the iPads in the back of these airplanes? They're awesome, right? But sometimes they don't work, right? So when they don't work, make sure you get that communication from the pilot. It's not that because if the iPad doesn't work, it's not that we don't know what the ground speed is. It's just we need to tell you that. And like a lot of times we can't see if it's on or off.
Someone said no. Can you explain what it is?
Yeah, great question. So the USPA puts out a competition, the STAR competition or whatever, and it's about emerging technology. Who am I talking to that doesn't know what it is? Perfect. Oh, yeah, of course. Well, there's iPads now. And they do this competition where it's evolving technology in the sport of skydiving. So the winner was somebody who developed a program to track, in essence, the ground speed of the jump run. And that way you don't have to ask the pilot, what's the ground speed? Because you can look back on these iPads and it tells you in big, bold letters what it is and then what the separation should be to get us that 1,000 feet apart from each other. Super awesome, right? Yeah, super cool. But again, if they don't work, don't be afraid to like ask the pilot what it is, and we're happy to tell you, and then we can figure out what's wrong with the iPad and get them going.
I've noticed that when it's not working, some people don't know what to do.
Yep.
What I've noticed is that you just, like double tap the home button and then like.
Yeah, sometimes it just needs to get restarted.
Yeah, restart.
Yeah, like if you, it's an iPad, right? We all know what iPads are. Cool. Just hit the home button, and then I think it's called, what is it called?
You like swipe up.
It's exit count. Yeah, you could just go to the home screen, hit exit count, and it'll fire right back up. Where I'm empowering you guys to do that. Cool. Because we can up front. Let's see what else. Make sure I caught everything. Obviously, we talked about center, or we haven't, but center of gravity of the airplane, right? When you're a big group getting out, if you're doing a 12-way out of this, we want to know because we need to know that the tail is going to get heavy. Same thing in a big way on the Otters or the Skyvans. Especially in the Skyvans, there's the line and painted in the middle of it. 10 jumpers is the max. And it's real easy as everybody starts shoveling towards the door to just walk past that line and not recognize that now the entire airplane's in the back. And as a pilot who flies the Skyvan a lot, it's terrifying when the airplane pitches up like this and you can't do anything about it. It's the worst feeling in the world. So just be aware, make other people aware in the Skyvan, or even in an Otter. If there's a big way getting out and you're a two-way afterwards, favor yourself up by the pilot, right? Give them a little bit of break and try to balance the weight out because if it stalls and you're in the airplane, like it's going to suck for you just as bad. We got seatbelts on up front. But it is going to be terrible. So just, again, situationally aware, what's around me, who's getting out in front of me, who's getting out back, and be aware of that center of gravity so we don't stall the airplanes and make YouTube videos.
If it stalls, what do you do as a jumper?
Yeah, cool. So if you're on the outside of the airplane, obviously let go. If you can get out of the airplane, let go. If you're inside of the airplane, you're probably going to get 0G to the top of the plane and then down to the bottom, and it's going to be a bit of a ride. We've all seen the videos of people on YouTube. Just it's a ride. I don't know the exact procedure, but I would try to get out of the airplane as fast as possible in the event that the plane gets in a flat spin or something, and then the pilot's got to jump and you're still in it. That'd be terrible, right? Any other questions? No? Any other stories that might be good?
Let's say on the very rare occasion that many of us start jumping out in an emergency.
Yep.
Do we all just start tracking the entire time to make sure we all get separation since we're all jumping at
So how do you know? Well, first of all, let's back up, right? So we say get out, and then what altitude are we at? If we're just in hop and pop altitude, nobody's tracking.
It's a stall, so it's like at 13,000.
Yeah, I would track away. Yeah, I don't think that there's a need to pull at 13,000 feet, right? The first thing I would want to do is try to identify where the airplane is and then go the other way, right? Because that airplane can be flopping and flipping all over the place, and you don't want to be anywhere near that, right? So I would track away. Like if you guys saw the plane-to-plane stunt when it flipped over and Luke just tracked away, or Andy just tracked away forever, same thing, right? I'd be like, I'm going to get away from that because who knows where it's going, and I'm tracking as far as I can go. Good? Cool. You guys are going to go to the AFP classroom next, and I think that's all I got. Cool. Be safe.
All right, so my name is Baxter. I think most of you guys know. I'm going to go through some basics of the canopy and landing procedures that we do, right? So when it comes to the canopy, we all know the basics, right? What's the 3 questions we ask when the canopy opens? Square. Is it steerable? Right? We all know about this, right? We've all learned this. We all know our decision altitude, correct? Most of us have one. How many decision altitudes do you have by technicality? 2. So we have 1 decision altitude for what? Yeah. When we decide we're going to go to our reserve, or 2? The hard deck is that, but it's also when are we going to decide when we're going to land, right? So we have an altitude of when we know we're going to go to our reserve, and 2, when we're going to change our plan and land somewhere else, right? Cool. So with that second altitude, right, we want to ensure we can make it back to a safe landing area. All right, so this is where we do all our procedure and stuff. But one of the big things we need to do is look where we are over the ground, right? After we do all our canopy control, we look out, make sure our canopy's there. Next thing we do, we want to look down, right? See where we are across the ground, right? A lot of people get confused because they see the drop zone over at a certain angle and they think they can make it, right? But when you look straight down, you can actually get a bigger gauge of how far and how much you have to actually travel, right? Know your altitude, right? Just like you do on free fall, you keep an eye on your altimeter. Under canopy, you should be doing the same thing as well, right? And then housekeeping, right? Do everybody understand what housekeeping is? What is housekeeping? Yeah, all that stuff, right? That's one of the last things we want to do. This is at this point, we've already decided our canopy's good. We know we're going to make it back, right? Now we're going to start fiddling with anything else, right? Because if you got to land somewhere else, or if you have an emergency procedure, you're not going to fiddle with your goggles. You're not going to deal with your chest strap, right? Those are the last things we deal with, right? So after our canopy checks, next thing we're going to do is we're going to fly to our holding area. We all know what the holding area is. This is a place we're going to go to. Make sure we can make it back before we start our pattern and burn our altitude, right? And at this point, when we're in our holding area, this is where we can do our practice maneuvers, work on any canopy drills, stuff like that, right? As we're heading there, or in the holding area, we're watching out for other canopies, right? So what's the one thing most of you probably been taught when you're on a canopy? Everybody heard it? Yeah, head on a swivel, right?
Everyone else is there to kill you.
Yeah, exactly, right? Constantly keeping an eye out for other people, right? Taking note of where everybody is. Communicating between canopies, right? Does everybody know how to communicate between canopies? Yeah, what's the kicking the legs mean?
Can you see you?
Yeah, and can you see me, right? That's you kick back, right? Anybody ever heard of the Iron Cross? Right? I saw Ryan Reb. Ryan Reb should know what an Iron Cross means.
Showing the other person and you're holding your break.
Yeah, usually it means I cannot get down any faster. So it's usually if you guys are converging on the same level, somebody will go like this. Usually means I can't get down any faster than I can do right now, which could mean a lot of things. They could be feeling sick, they could be hurt, whatever it is. They don't want to get it down any faster. Or same with you. You don't want to get down any faster, or you want to let somebody pass you. Iron Cross is the easiest way to notify somebody about that. Right? Personal thing I like to do, which I think everybody should do, is count canopies. Okay? So when I'm getting in the plane or I'm in the loading area, I take note of who's in the plane. When it comes to tandems, when it comes to students, when it comes to fun jumpers, I take note. Right? I try to count as many people in there. So when I open up, I try to count as many canopies in there. What this does for me is when it comes to the head on a swivel, it makes my life a whole lot easier. Because if I can count, if I go in the plane, I realize there's 10 canopies in the air with me, and I can count those 10 canopies in the air after I open up, makes my life a little bit better, right? Because then I'm not surprised by anybody on where they're going. So, but then again, if you count 8 canopies, you know there's 2 missing, right? And those 2 people could be anywhere. They could be above you, below you. You don't know what's going on. But it's an easy way to kind of keep track of everybody and make your life a little bit easier when you fly your canopy. Right away. Does everybody know the right away? Who has the absolute most right away on your canopy?
First person for dance. The first person for dance.
Reserves. Why reserves? Yeah, well, 1, it's their last final canopy, and 2, you don't know why they're under that canopy, right? They could be having issues you don't know, right? So we want to give them the absolute right away. And then it comes to tandems, right? And we got our students, and then we got our fun jumpers. When it comes to fun jumpers, Who has the right of way? Well, if you're on the same level?
Smaller canopy?
Bigger canopy. Why the bigger canopy?
Might be less experienced.
Maybe. Yeah, they move slower, right? If you're on a smaller canopy than someone else, you can move out of the way a lot faster than somebody under the big canopy, right? So in general, it's the big canopies, small canopies, right? And then after that, it's usually the low man gets the right of way, right? Okay. On the way back, if you do your canopy checks, if you can, I like to do it too, is just look for cutaways, right? Just look out for your fellow skydivers, right? You see somebody cut away, if you can, and you can do it safely, you can watch them land, right? Take note of where they're landing. That way when you land, you can notify somebody, say, hey, I saw so-and-so. If you can watch their gear, right? As long as you can, and again, as long as you can do it safely, you can watch out where their gear lands so you can report to them, say, hey, I saw your main land over here, I saw your free bag land over here. It's kind of more of a courtesy thing, right? But just take note that if you can't do it, right, if you got your own problems, deal with your own problems before you deal with that. Right? We talked about that, report back. Right? On the way back, right, on your way back, you got to determine if you can make it back. Right? Does everybody know how to determine if they're going to make it back? What's one way to do it?
Halfway down, halfway there.
Yeah, halfway there, halfway back, right? Do you know what that actually means? Does everybody know what halfway back, halfway means? Which means, can you fly halfway back to the drop zone on half your altitude? Okay, and that half your altitude is not your actual. So if you're sitting at 5,000 feet, it's not 2,500, right? Because when do we all want to start our pattern? About 1,000 feet, right? So you actually only have about 4,000 feet. So half your altitude is really in 2,000 feet. So in 2,000 feet, can you make it halfway back, right? That's one way. What's another way?
If you look at something and like see if it's going, up or down in your field of view,
Yeah.
you can use that.
I call it the magic spot, right? It's that idea. Does everybody understand how that works? Right? So you look out, find a spot, and see whether a spot is moving forward, moving away from you, moving towards you, or not at all. Right? If that spot is moving away from you, where do you land relative to that spot?
Sure.
If it's moving towards you, cool. All right. Check the winds. So everybody knows how to do a penetration check, right? How do we do that? Yeah. Not necessarily turn in the wind, but if you can, but it's the idea is to face the direction, look between your feet, tells you what the winds are doing, right? Do a 180, do it again, right? That'll help determine where the winds are going and see how fast you're moving, right? Look for other canopies, right? See how fast they're moving, see what they're doing, see if they're moving sideways, right? See if they're moving fast, see if they're going backwards, right? Help you out. Okay. So this is what a lot of people, I think, neglect when it comes to canopy flight, is having a secondary plan, having a plan B, right? Right. When it comes to free fall, we all have that plan B, right? If you fall out, this is what you do. If you get to, if somebody else falls out of the skydive, this is what you do, right? But when it comes to canopy, a lot of people forget that just because you're exiting over a good spot, everything's going good for the day, that one jump, all of a sudden you could be 2 miles off the drop zone for whatever reason, right? So you should always have a secondary plan, right? So the easy way to come up with a secondary plan is, even on a good jump, look down on the ground, right? Look for alternatives, right? As you're flying back to the drop zone, you got your back from a long spot, or even on your normal flight, take a look at the ground, right? Especially on a new drop zone. See what you can see. Because there's certain areas we will point out to you. We tell you about the west out, the north out, all that stuff. But we may not tell you about some little house that's over here that looks like they have a nice backyard, or somebody else over here that has a backyard that you definitely don't want to hit, right? So take a look at the ground and take note of where you want to be. Because one day that might be the spot where you need to land, right? And if you've already seen it and you already know about it, it just makes your stress levels go down. And that's where Anthony was talking about earlier, that whole panic mode, right? And if you can come up with a plan long before you need it, that panic goes down a lot more than if you have to make that last decision at 1,000 feet of where to land, right? And then modify your plan accordingly, right? So we all know what pattern we're going to do in the main landing area. That's fine and dory. But when you have to land in the north out or the west out or somewhere else, that plan is going to change, right? The pattern's going to change, right? And the sooner you modify that plan, the better, right? We all know about flying the rears, the brakes back to our drop zone. However, have your brakes unstowed by your decision altitude, right? We don't want to figure out 1,000 feet that our brakes are not coming out, right? So yes, you can leave your brakes stowed for a little while, but by your decision altitude, you should have your brakes unstowed, regardless if you're making it back or not, right? You need to know that you're going to land this canopy, okay? We already talked about determine landing area, so know your altitude, make sure your landing area is clear of obstacles, determine the wind direction, right, and plan your pattern, right? We talked about all that. Okay, so we all have our landing priorities. Any questions so far? Cool. Landing priorities, we all have them, we all know them. What's our first landing priority?
Level wing.
Level wing, what's that mean? Canopy is straight above our head, right? Straight flight, not turning, anything like that. What's our second priority?
Open area.
Right, low. Yep, so land in an open area or land clear of obstacles, however you want to remember it. What's your third priority? Flare what? At least halfway, right? Get at least half a flare in. What's our last priority? What's our last priority? Yes. Do we care which way the winds are going? No. Canopy really doesn't care either, right? But we'll always be ready to PLF, okay? Because we can always stand up a PLF, right, in our skydives, but we always want to be ready to PLF, right? The other thing we want to do is we want to fly our pattern. Right, this is where we stick to that plan. Why do we want to fly our pattern? Yeah, exactly, right? So people behind us or the people in front of us, right? That we know where they're going and they know where we're going, so we all land in that nice, safe area, and right, we're not trying to dodge people. We all been on the highway where we hate that guy that doesn't use their signal and just kind of going weaving in and out of traffic. We don't want to be that guy, right? Everybody know a flat turn? Right? So as you're flying the pattern, you're doing your flat turns as appropriate, right? Sometimes you have to do them low to the ground to avoid your obstacles as needed. Things happen, right? However, Anthony said earlier about the turbulence, right? If we're in a turbulent area, do we really want to try flat turns? No. Sometimes we're better off just keeping it fly and flare when we need to, right? If we're coming in a little hot, especially when we're coming on downwind, sometimes we have to slide it out. A PLF may not be the best option. Maybe sliding out is. Does everybody know what a baseball slide is? What is a baseball slide?
So you kind of have your 2 feet in front of you, you slide more on your thigh to your butt on the side, not directly on your tailbone.
Why do you want to slide on your tailbone?
You don't break it.
Yeah, right. We want to take the meaty parts of our body here, and we want to let that take the brunt, right? We're landing in grass, we might be landing in the corn, somewhere off, right? We can't always see those rocks or divots that are hidden in the ground, right? It's better off that we hit it with our meaty parts than if we hit the tailbone, right? So we want to try to avoid sliding straight on our butts. We want to take that turn and slide more on our hips. As we're landing, same thing as always, right? Watch for others landing, keep your head on a swivel, even after you land, right? Because your skydive might be over at that point, but somebody else's is not. Right? Okay. As we're coming in for landing, we want to flare at the appropriate height, and that changes from canopy to canopy, from situation to situation, from winds and all that stuff, right? So know when the appropriate height, on average, what is it? About 10 to 12 feet, that's the average, right? It changes based on the winds and other things. Canopy flight cycle. Everybody understand what a canopy flight cycle is? What is a canopy flight cycle?
What you do, it has to go through a cycle of losing some kind of altitude.
Yeah, to a point until it gets back to a stable flight or normal flight, right? How long does that usually take, on average?
2 seconds.
About 8 to 10 seconds, right? It's a long. What's that?
Can you explain that again?
So when you're flying your canopy nice and straight and level, and then you do an input and go back up, it takes your canopy about 8 to 10 seconds to go back to that level flight, right? It might be, depending on the input, it might not be a big input, might not be a big adjustment, but your canopy is still kind of settling out to go back to its normalcy. Make sense? Right? So what I mean by this is if you flare too high, right, at about 15 feet and you go back up, right, do you have about 8 to 10 seconds before your canopy is back into that normal cycle, right? So your flare is going to change again, right? So your canopy, your inputs are all going to change, right? So just know that as you flare, if you flare too high, you flare too low, your canopy takes time to recover, and usually it's not instantaneous, right? So it takes time for your canopy things. So things are going to change fast, right? As you're coming in for landing, right, where are your eyes? Yeah, out forward, right? Avoid that ground rush. How do we get ground rush?
You look straight down, not
Yeah,
around.
right. we don't do our day-to-day lives by looking down between our feet as we walk, so we're not used to it, right? We're used to looking out this way. So same thing when you come in for landing, you look out towards the horizon, keep your eyes up. That'll help gauge the altitude more than anything, right? As you're coming in for landing, flare symmetrically, right? Hands are even. Even if you feel like we've probably all done it, where you feel that canopy get picked up or start to get pushed off one way or the other, right? Keep your hands symmetrical, right? Yes, you might get that pick up a little bit, but that's fine. As long as you keep that canopy above your head, you'll probably land okay. When you start trying to correct for that little bit, now you're actually starting to turn your canopy, right? Most of you have probably noticed that you fly your canopy more by feel, right? So as you're coming in for flaring, you're landing, feel what your canopy is doing, right? Feel it in the harness. At this point, most of you guys should know what a good flare feels like when your canopy is starting to go off one way or the other. Avoid the reaching, right? What do I mean by reaching? Yeah, stick your hand out, brace. It's the most natural human thing to do when we're about to fall over, is we want to reach, right? Reach with an arm, reach with a leg, whatever it is. You want to avoid that. Keep your feet together, keep that flare. Trust that that flare is going to save you when you keep it symmetrical. But as soon as you start reaching, that flare you're not going to be flaring anymore. You're going to be turning at that point, right? And then another big thing I see a lot of people not doing is finishing the flare. Okay. Oh, well. Yeah. Wow. All right. Yeah, everybody got the warning now? That's cool. All right. So finishing the flare. It's one of the big things I see a lot of people not doing. Right? They come in for landing, especially on a windy day, they kind of just stop, and as soon as they land, they let their hands up, right? Make sure to finish that flare. Now, when it comes to finishing that flare, where does that mean?
Make it stall.
Almost, right? To the point, you don't want to go quite to the stall point, right? But it's also knowing where that stall point is, right? Your finishing the flare is going to be different from somebody else's, right? Especially for students all the way down, yeah, that's a full flare for them. For me, it's here. For you, it might be somewhere in between, right? So know where that point is. All right. So landing off. I think most of us have landed off by this point, right? Landed off somewhere else, right? Where we don't plan on. All right. Okay. So if you're landing off, sometimes it happens when the whole group is landing off. If you can, try to land together, right? It's usually safer when you guys are landing all in the same spot. So if anybody gets hurt or anything happens, right? Avoid target fixation. Everybody know what target fixation is? What is that?
You stare too hard at an object, you start consciously going to it.
Right. So if you stare at the open area, where are you going to go? Right. So you always want to try to look where you want to go, not where you don't want to go. Right? I see a lot of this too, right? People trying to impress people, trying to be a badass and stuff, but they always try to stand up their landing. Right? It's not always the case. Right? Especially when you're landing off, you don't always know what's in the ground. Sometimes you look down and you think it's nice and soft, but it's 3 feet of grass, right? Always be ready to PLF. Use that PLF as needed, right? Because it's better to do a PLF than walk away than try to do a stand-up landing and end up breaking your ankle or your leg or something like that, right? But don't force it, right? Avoid the trees, rivers, buildings, roads, anything like that. We all know about that. Cornfields, right? We all have them around here. Does anybody know how to land in a cornfield? Preferably, yeah. What else?
Getting your body together.
How high do you flare? Well, it depends. Is it June or is it September? Right? So know where the corns are at, right? Know that before you take off, right? Know, are the corns at 2 feet today or are they at 8 feet today, right? When you come in for landing, what's one of the things you want to take note?
Are you going to get out?
Yeah. What direction are you landing? Right? Try to see where the sun is, right? It'll help get you out. Right? So building, like big buildings, silos, anything like that, if you can see those, use to help get your bearings. Okay? Talked about that. Walk with the rows. However, just remember, when you get to the end of the rows here, the outside tend to go around. Right? So these rows are actually going this way. So if you land on one of these outside rows, you may not want to walk with them. Right? So know how you're landing in the field. If you land off, especially if you're landing like the horse farm. Yes, that way. Right? When you're landing the horse farm, one of the 2 fields out there, know which way to go. Right? What do we do in the horse farm? Yeah, we all stay still. Otherwise, there's a couple of fields out there, the landing area 1 and 2. You go down to the highway, that kind of stuff. So as you're coming in for landing, if you know you're going to land off, this is also where it helps that planning ahead, and when you have a good canopy and you know you can make it back, is determining where everything else is, right? Making that plan for later in the back of your mind that if I land here, oh, then I have to walk over here, right? Okay, so talk about landing off afterwards. So, right, okay. Here at SDC, we all recommend everybody jump with a cell phone. All right, you know what, why do we jump with a cell phone? Yeah, especially we land on the corn, we land on the horse farm, or anything like that across the other side of the river. It's a nice way to communicate, make sure you're okay, and report back on your location. 5 minutes? Okay.
I feel like the staff here is so good. They're just like there by the time you're like.
Yeah, we're very vigilant. Yeah, we're very vigilant. We like our neighbors here, right? So that's the other thing. My next point is we like our neighbors. So be nice, right? If you land in somebody's backyard, I've been in a lot of places where neighbors are not so nice. They want to yell, scream. I've even heard neighbors pointing guns at people. The best you can do is just be nice. Be courteous. Say thank you. Don't argue with them because you're just going to lose anyways. But be nice to neighbors. Around here, we're pretty good. We, Anthony and all of them, they have a really good communication with all the neighbors here. So they all know about us. As you're walking around the property, getting off the property, be respectful, right? So avoid breaking locks, fences, trampling people's flower beds, that kind of thing, right? We all want to keep good standings with our neighbors. If you can, get to the main roads, right? That's if you can. If you're hurt or anything like that, stay where you are, right? If you broke your leg, don't try to hobble over the road. We'll come get you. Like he was saying, we're pretty good at finding people here, right? We're keeping an eye on everybody. Again, that's where it comes into handy that if you do see somebody land off and you land, just try to say, hey, I saw so-and-so land over here, right? I saw somebody land over here if you want to go pick them up, right? Some basic emergencies. If you land and you need 911, what do we do? Just call. Don't worry about calling us, right? We'd rather have 100 phone calls going to 911 and then have to worry about you calling us first and then have to call, right? So if there is a situation where you need it, just call. Okay. Otherwise, if there's some minor stuff, like, right, so some basic stuff after you land, signaling for help. We've all done it, had a tumble, right, had a rough landing. If you're okay, what do we do? Just stand up. If you're not okay, yeah, just stay down, right? If you see somebody else that's kind of okay, but they need to ride back, they're not quite injured, but they can't really walk home, what do we do?
Call a Kubota.
How do we call a Kubota? Yeah. Right? Wave with one hand. If they're seriously hurt or we need immediate help, 2 hands. Right? Okay. So in general, pilot in command, right? That's your job. Right? Be proactive. So when you're flying your canopy, always be a step ahead. Right? You don't want to be caught in the back and reacting to a situation, right? You always want to be ahead of what's going on and knowing the situation. You don't want to be caught in anything like that, right? So always be proactive and constantly flying your canopy, right? Right? As you fly your canopy, you're not taking a break, right? You're not just like driving a car. I think we've all done it before. We're in the car and we kind of all zone out a little bit on the highways, right? We've all done it, and all of a sudden somebody comes up on us, we get surprised. Let's not do that on your canopy, right? Right? So be actively flying the canopy. So you're constantly flying that canopy, being in control of it, telling it where you want to go, right? Not letting it take you. We avoid those low turns by planning ahead, right? So we've all seen the fatalities, right? Most of the time, those low turns are caused by somebody not planning far enough ahead, right? Making those poor decisions at the last second. And if they had thought about it earlier and had a plan, it's like, at this altitude, I would not do the turns. Probably wouldn't have happened, right? So always be ahead of what you want to do, right? And constantly keep that head on a swivel. Right? I like this saying. I've heard it many times, but a good pilot knows how to swoop. A great pilot knows when to bail. Right? Everybody understand that concept? Right? Knowing when to back out or change your plan is a lot better than doing that good swoop. Right? We can all come back and try that swoop again, but at the end of the day, if you decide not to go with it and it was a bad idea, you may not be able to ever do it again. Right? Okay. It's just some basic stuff on downsizing. Right? There are lots of things to consider when you're downsizing, but the big thing is know your limits. Right? Do you know, can you land in various different kinds of winds? Can you land crosswind? Can you land downwind? Just note on that, we had somebody last year decide to practice downwind landing on 20-mile-an-hour winds. Probably not the best idea, right? With that being said, though, you should be comfortable with landing down that wind, but it's not a everyday thing. That's a emergency situation. Yes, I can do it. I can land myself safely and probably not kill myself, but it shouldn't be a practice thing, right? If you do want to practice downwind landings, I usually recommend on winds less than 5 miles an hour, right? Flaring out a turn. Has everybody practiced a flat turn to flare? Everybody understand what that is, right? You should be able to know that concept, that low turn, be able to do a flat turn and flare from that turn, things like that. Appropriate canopy for appropriate skill level, right? Know yourself. That's the big thing. If somebody's probably telling you you're not ready for that small canopy, probably should take note, right? But also know who that person's telling you. If somebody with 100 jumps is probably telling you that, they probably don't know squat. Go to somebody else who does. If somebody like myself is telling you not, you may want to listen, right? So get your appropriate canopy for skill level, right? Currency is a big thing. That's why we're all here today, right? We're all trying to get current again. But know what your currency level is. Know where to get advice, right? We're all skydivers. We all like to talk, right? Getting your advice at the bonfire after 6 beers in is probably not the place to get it, right? We got plenty of coaches, plenty of instructors here, and we'll give you the best advice we can give you, right? Understand the risk to benefit ratio when flying smaller canopies, right? This is probably the biggest thing that people, I think, miss out on. If you get hurt, yeah, cool. Who are you hurting, right? A lot of people out there, their parents, their family members, right? They're taking care of people. If you get hurt, are you taking care of somebody else, and can they be taken care of, or vice versa? If you get hurt, who's going to take care of you, right? And just know that the smaller the canopy you get, the closer you are to getting into that situation, right? So understanding that risk and knowing what level of risk you're willing to take. Right? Okay. And currently right now, the USPA is actually creating a must-follow kind of downsize chart. Right? This is still in proposal, but right now the USPA is working on a list of, you got this many jumps, you're at this weight, here's the canopy you can fly. Okay. I don't know how far this will go, how much is in the list, but it's only, right now it's only up to 500 jumps, which is funny because most, like Anthony said, most of the people hurting themselves in the sport are beyond 500 jumps, right? So it's a nice thing to list. I'm not sure how good this actually downsizing chart is going to be because most people are already beyond this list already that are hurting themselves, right? So, but take note that is in the works. Cool. Otherwise, any questions for me? You guys look so awake right now.
said before. Kyle doesn't talk.
I know, that's why
I've got to do 20 minutes of entertainment.
I was really excited.
I don't dance, and I'm not really good at comedy, but y'all are laughing anyway. So, see, that's a good comedian like that. I really don't have. We didn't have anything really built for this year. We apologize because we were kind of late getting started as far as packing. But what we're going to go over is just a couple of things about your gear, what we do down here, and what you can expect of us, and then we'll go over some. I have some parts and pieces that are wore out that I'll show you, and then a couple of mards and stuff. So this is Kyle. Kyle will be our front man upstairs, and he will be receiving your gear as you come in and then sending it down to me. My name's Rob. We're both senior riggers, so any questions can go to either one of us. He's just as smart as I am, I found out, which doesn't say a lot. So anyway, we're gonna let's start talking about gear first. So at the end of the winter, a lot of us have stayed home. We didn't skydive. We left our gear probably in a closet in a nice cool place. But there are those that have driven around with it in the trunk of their car or in the back of their truck or somewhere. So what should you be looking for? Well, we're going to look for anything that's wrong. For you guys, when you initially bring your gear out of wherever it's been stored, I want you to look it over really good. Before you open anything up, go ahead and touch it, right? Feel. As you're looking, look with your hands as well. We want to look at all the stitching. We want to look at the cloth. Make sure everything's still solid there. Make sure that your harness is still there and in good condition. The reason I say there is mice like to steal stuff, right? And part of what they like is the cloth because they can take bits of it home and make a nice nest. This is good stuff for nesting material. So go ahead and give your harness and your container a good look over. If there's holes in it, yeah, freak out a little bit, but it's okay. We can fix these things. Little holes can be patched. Bigger holes, flaps can be replaced, things like that. So if you do have problems with your gear, don't sweat, bring it to us. We're going to help make it right. The hardware. A lot of times people live in really humid areas, so your hardware takes a chance of rusting too if you don't leave it in the closet. Or if you've been in Sebastian all winter skydiving, it's really, really humid down there. Then you're coming back up here. You're going to want to give your hardware a really good look over. Make sure there's no rust on it, right? The older cadmium plated hardware, the finish rubs off of it, and then it's just bare steel. So those older containers are going to be more prone to this kind of rust than the newer stuff. But they all do it. So then we're going to look in places inside to make sure it's not rusting, right? Not just the outside. You guys are going to look at it and go, oh yeah, it looks good. But I'm going to look inside the little cracks and crevices that probably you don't even know exist on these things because we want to make sure it's 100%. So we're looking at the hardware. Even your grommets. If you're seeing brown spots on your closing loop, let me know. There's rust on your stainless steel. Freaks out. It shouldn't happen, but it does. I've seen it, okay? So check everything. Grommets, if you've got it open and you can see your grommets, make sure they're round. If you're closing your stuff really, really tight, you will oblong the grommets as well. I can replace these. It's not that expensive. So keep a good look on those kinds of things. When you bring your gear to us to look at it, that's not all we're going to look at. We're actually going to take the reserve out. We're going to hang it just like this. We're going to look at all the integral components to it. I'm going to look at all the edging, the stitching. We're going to look at everything we can find on this because I don't want to find a problem. I want it to be 100%. I'm also going to hang up your parachute like we have this one hung up, and we're going to look at everything on this as well. I'm going to start at the risers. Again, looking at hardware, make sure there's no rust, looking at the webbing, good condition, the lines. I want to make sure the lines are in good condition as well. Where your lines connect to your riser, there's two places of wear. The riser can wear and your lines can wear inside that loop. Please go ahead and look in the loop and make sure they're in good condition for yourself. This is a spot check you can do on the floor right before you pack. But for us, we're going to look at everything. We're going to even make sure the cascades have their little bar tacks. There's a bar tack just about everywhere on these parachutes. There's threads where somebody has been sewing. We're going to look at all of these stitches and make sure they're in good condition. The skin itself in good condition. The top skin the same way. No holes, no rips, no tears. We're going to look at all of it. The even best part of it is I'm going to crawl up inside this guy and I want to see inside the stitching and all of that as well. But the other thing I'm going to be looking at in here is the holes in your parachute. Now, you guys know there's holes in it, right? Because I had a load organizer with like 800 jumps come to me in a frenzy going, your parachute has a hole. Yeah, it has several across the board, right? Those are there for a reason. I want to make sure that they're not fraying or tearing. They will eventually start to tear, and that will compromise the strength of your rib, right? So we need to know these. That's why we do canopy inspections, so I can look at your holes there. I'm going to make sure it even has a label on it, because if the label has been removed, can we skydive with it? No. Somebody grounded that parachute by removing the label. The label's wore off. I can't read it. Can I jump it? Can I sell it? Yeah, it's got a label on there. We have no clue what it says, but it's still okay, right? So, yeah. Yeah, we're going to look at everything. Grommets on your slider, we want to make sure that they're not nicked, have anything wrong with them, because they will destroy your lines up and down. A friend of mine made like 5 jumps on one of his and realized it was a bad slider. He had line damage right away and was really upset about that. So keep an eye on that. Yeah, basically we're going to look at all of it. I'm going to even fire up your AAD, make sure it works, and get jump numbers off of it and when it's due for its next service. So, any questions about that kind of stuff? Looking at your gear, checking your gear, repairing your gear.
Will the length of the lines ever change and be out of trim?
There are some lines that do change length, and that is an awesome question. You will find that the Vectran and the HMA, which I run HMA, they don't stretch or change their length by much, if any. What they're going to do is just wear and break on you. Now the white Spectra that you see on older model canopies, that stuff tends to shrink over time. You would think if we're jumping it and pulling it, we'd stretch it. But what happens is when it pulls it to its stretch, and then it shrinks back even further than it used to be. So they do shorten. And it tends to be from the outside to the inside that you'll start seeing that. And we can replace the lines. We can do a line set change. So, you know, if you're encountering that kind of issue, yeah, let's look into it and see what's going on with those lines. Most canopies today will be either Vectran or HMA. Very rarely are we putting out Spectra anymore, except for special purposes, guys that are doing crew. They like the Dacron lines. Other guys with bigger canopies and they're going to have harder openings, they're going to do a Spectra line for more stretch kind of a concept, right? To eliminate pain kind of a thing.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Then what's changed in years? I've been gone for a while, so.
What's changed?
Yeah.
The lines, baby. The lines have changed. Actually, quite a lot has changed in 10 years. From the shapes of parachutes to the style, to the construction of them, to the lines, a lot of the gear, albeit it's still a wheel. Some of the design of the wheel has been modded a little bit. There's been quite a bunch of changes. Yeah, you're going to be actually pleasantly surprised with what you start seeing out here now.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. Any other questions about that? Cool. I didn't give you all time. Anyway, so we're going to talk a little bit about why we want to look at this stuff and make sure it's in good shape. So I have here a piece of webbing that has a straight mark on it. This can happen when you don't loosen your leg straps and you just leave them tight all the time. You push it down like a pair of pants, right? And pull them back up, but you never release it. And that puppy just sits in that same place constantly. So when you drop your gear, I suggest letting your straps open, right? So we can relieve the pressure and that wear point, and you're not constantly in the same place. But you can see that that will eventually be very dangerous. Along that same lines in keeping your webbing, you notice most of the webbing we use has a yellow fiber on each edge. That line does not stretch. It's not pullable. All the rest of this will actually stretch when we load it, but that line doesn't. What that is there for is to tell us that the edging is in good condition. When that little yellow line breaks, that also means some of these other edges have broke. It's a good possibility this webbing will fail, right? So that's where it's going to start ripping, and it'll rip right across it, right open. And when these do start ripping, it's kind of like a zipper. It's really scary how fast that stuff can undo itself. Okay. The other last one I have here is chemicals. This was bleach, and this is red webbing. It wasn't used on a harness. It was here in the shop, but it did get wet with it, and so it's a great example of what happens. You can see everybody's been ripping on it. You can literally rip that with your fingers now from what that chemical has done to the nylon. So that's pretty scary. So keep all of your cleaning products away from your gear, right? Okay, and pilot shoes. This is another good one. We don't really look at it a lot. We wad it up, we throw it in the pocket, we pull it out, we throw it at the air, we wad it up, we put it in the pocket, but we don't really take a good look at it. You really should every so often. These guys get weak when the threads in it start moving. It's the same thing as having a hole in it, right? You have a hole in it, it's going to leak, it's not going to do its job as well. So make sure your pilot chute is in good condition. One of the places you're going to get a hole really quick is right here near the handle, particularly if you guys have free fly handles. The tab, when you're grabbing that tab, you're also grabbing into your cloth of your pilot chute sometimes, right? So you want to be careful. Take a good look around that handle and make sure that pilot chute's in good condition. Same with the flip side of it. We have mesh on here to allow air in to help it fill. The problem is the mesh likes to break down. Over time, with just wear and tear, you can see it does some damage to it. But there are places, there is a hole in this guy somewhere.
Right there.
Right here. Right? A hole that size, I'm going to ask that we replace this. Because it's possible that it gets bigger, your handle will invert through it, and then you've got this big ball of nothing above your head, right? Don't play around with these guys. Yeah, it's what, 150 bucks, 200 bucks, whatever. It's important. It's the first thing we do before we get a parachute over our head. So let's make sure these two skins are in great condition. As well, the bridle itself. You want to make sure where it attaches, it's in solid condition. Your bridle is in good condition, stitching on both sides, if it's a kill. If you have a non-kill line in it, it'll be a single piece of webbing. With a kill line in there, if your kill line is starting to wear or get short, you're going to start seeing a discoloration on here. You might see a white or gray kind of line in your bridle, right? Bring it to me. Let's look at that. There might be a kill line issue going on. It might have gotten short and is activating really fast, burning the bridle, or it's wore out and really fuzzy like this one, and that in of itself will burn the bridle because it's got these little bally knots on it, right? So it's an important thing. The other part of your bridle to look at is where it attaches to your D-bag. There's usually either a metal link or a slink keeping that together, right? And there's a reason we keep that on there. If your bridle pulls through and the canopy is still in the bag, it's not coming out of the bag. It's captured in there. You've probably got a bag lock going on now. It's not going to pull it out. Don't trust it, right? What do we do? EPs. So we want to make sure that attachment point is in good condition. As you can see on this one, it's got a lot of fray and wear on it on both sides. And I'm really glad we changed this one when we did, because if it breaks, it's gone. So, and that's a pilot chute. Any questions about that?
What we have to look out for on this side?
Looking for holes where particularly close to your handle.
Yeah, but you said something about like it's almost just as bad as having a hole.
When your cloth, if you hold this up to the light this way, and look through it to the light, you'll start seeing areas where the thread is separating and moving.
Hey, Zeus, I got some pictures I can show you of my pilot shoot.
So like this right here?
You can upload it. Hey, Zeus?
We're not using it anymore.
I got some pictures of my pilot shoot from last year that had that exact same issue I can show you.
Gotcha. I do see some holes on it too.
Yeah. And what that does is allows air through, right? Which then is not retaining like we want to do the pull that we want. It's got a weaker pull. You might end up with that in tow. Maybe you've packed really tight and it can't hold the pin. I've seen it. I've had a slow, weak one that I had to chicken dance it out a couple times before I changed it. It's not fun. Okay, that's managing your gear. Any questions about that? Does everybody know what a MARD is?
Nope.
Can anybody tell me what a MARD is? Right. So that means when you cut away your main, it's going to help pull the reserve out off your back. There are multiple types of MARD. I believe there's 6. I know I can name 5 of them. Right? You have Skyhook, Trap, Boost, Mojo, what was the other one? There's one more. I can't remember what it was. But Ace, right? So as you can see, there's a bunch of different ones out there. What they are is an assist to get the reserve off your back quicker than the length of the bridle attached to your free bag, right? Because it is attached to the bridle midpoint between your reserve parachute and the other end of the bridle. It's attached to the pilot chute, to the bag. It's right in the middle of it. Now the Skyhook is a simple lever action, right? It's one metal piece sewn on, no moving parts. If you cut away and you use your RSL, this is what's occurring with the Skyhook. This is your main, this is pulling your reserve out. If you use only your reserve and you do not have a main and you just pull your reserve handle, look how easy they came apart. There's only a piece of thread that would tie those together. You now have a reserve parachute without a main. You have a reserve parachute with a main, right? Simple, one lever. Problem is, there's more than one kind of MARD out there. We have this guy that has a lot of moving parts on it, as you can see. This piece goes to your reserve. This piece goes to your main cable that cut your reserve pin. And this piece is your bridle midway between pilot chute and reserve parachute. So if we cut away, it pulls everything, right? If we pop just reserve, it's just reserve. Again, a lot of moving parts, but it will save your life when you need it, okay? The last one I have a version of is called the Trap. This is what you find in a Mirage. Again, your RSL, which connects to your main, your loop that goes through your reserve cable, so that we'll pull the pin first. But then what happens is it wants to catch this bridle in a slip knot. That is now your main assisted reserve deployment. If you do only a reserve, all of this will still stay inside its little packet here, and this guy comes out and you have a reserve. Your main is still in your container. Okay? That's the 3 versions of MARD that I have. If you guys ever have any questions about it and you want to know more, please. Anything else?
Got about 5 minutes.
Any questions? Everybody, yeah?
So with all these different types of MARDs,
Mm-hmm.
is there, why the variety? Do they all work equally
Patent
well?
pending, baby. Patent pending. That's why the variety. The cool part is, yes, they all work. Everyone, I've seen them all say glass. Literally, they all work. Do I like them? No. I have my favorites, just like I have my favorite gear. Right? So, yes, they work. If you're buying a container and it has a MARD, don't question what kind of MARD. Just understand that that MARD is there, and it's going to function as they've tested, as I've seen, and it's going to save your life. So, yeah, it's kind of like buying a car. Nowadays, you buy a car, you're getting an airbag, right? Same thing. I buy a rig, I want to have a MARD in it. Just making it no longer an option, just make it part of the deal. I think everybody should have them in their rigs because they do save lives. Any other questions?
What is your favorite gear, Rob?
I'm a SunPath guy. I like SunPath, mainly for the fit and the shape. I went, see, right? The design of the shape of the container, I liked it. I put it on, it fit, I jumped for a few years, and when I could finally afford brand new gear, I went that direction. I haven't been disappointed yet. Huh?
What's their MARD? What's their MARD?
Skyhook. That's the other reason. That's one of my favorites. Right? Single lever action, simplicity. Yeah, so that's why I chose that. Now, also, I deal with a lot of gear, so I was lucky enough, blessed enough to see the differences and make a very informed choice. Newer jumpers don't quite have that. They have to go through some used gear before they find what they really like. You know? So it's harder in the beginning. And so I really don't try to lead people like that too much. I let your first rig buy what you want, and we'll go from there. But then as you start gaining experience, you'll start finding that container that fits the type of skydiving you're into.
Does SunPath and the Vector, do they run the same MARD system? Is it, no, yes?
SunPath and Vector have Skyhook.
Okay, yeah.
Again, that's why I went with Skyhook.
And is an RSL just like in addition to like a MARD, like just an extra attachment, or?
MARD is an addition to the RSL.
Okay.
The RSL reserves static, right?
Right.
So what that did in the beginning was pulled your pin.
Yeah.
The RSL just opens your container, allows the pilot chute to do its job. The MARD actually does the job for the pilot chute. Right? Doesn't eliminate it, it's still there. Skyhook sometimes in the right sequence may come loose from your bag, right? When it's out and deployed. But it's still functioning like and like the Skyhook's really cool because this is sitting right up in here, right there, right up inside all that. Right? It's really
RSL?
Right, the RSL, the difference. So the RSL obviously is pulling the pin. So like on mine here, my RSL is pulling my cutaway cable in one side. So you can see it's pulling the pin, right? At the same time, the little red lanyard's pulling this guy out at the same time. So just the fact that it pulled the pin, RSL. Right. Then it starts pulling this out, then I call it a MARD. So that's the only real difference between the two.
So what happens if you detach your RSL? Is the MARD still going to
The MARD is now disconnected. No MARD. You disconnect from your main, everything's off. Yeah. Because then you have to pull the, no matter what you do here, you have to pull this handle, right? You've just turned it off, basically. Yes. Good question.
Is it, when do you unhook an RSL now?
Any instructors? Okay, I'm just the rigger, so the reason I would unhook my RSL. One, if I'm flocking with a bunch of other canopies. If I'm going to have a lot of canopies around me, I don't want to get in a round, right? The other reason is wind. If I know it's a windy day, and I'm coming into land, and I know the winds are running 24, and I made the decision to jump anyway, I may, before I enter my pattern, disconnect it before I land, so that when I get blown off on the ground, I can at least cut it away without deploying my reserve on the ground with my full. Right?
Also, if you're landing on top of a building.
That's where we're going next, right? If you're landing on top of something, and you want to get rid of that main, again, we want to get rid of that main before it can drag us off the building. Or if I'm going into water, if I'm aware and conscious and I'm headed towards a lake or a river or ocean, I will do it then. Yeah, those are the instances I would disconnect. I'm not an instructor, so please don't take my Cool. That's all I got. You guys got anything? No?
Last round.
Happy Safety Day!
I'm the cameraman.
You're an asshole for going there and not
I found this in an empty cube.
Did you really?
Yeah.
I bet you had such a good time.
It was so much fun.
That is such a beautiful place. Huh? No, always. It's the beginning of the season. Yeah.
Okay, where am I going? I just follow.
Yeah.
No, just kind of talk a little bit loud. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
All right, so how's everyone doing?
Great.
Good. Survived the storms.
Oh, is it over now?
Oh, my phone's not buzzing, so. All right, so guys, I'm going to go over emergency procedures. So I am going to touch base on some other stuff. Like I mentioned up there, there's a lot more of just what happened, but why it happened. And I'm going to go over that a little bit. So, on the agenda, we're going to go over some stats and accidents that happened specifically here at Skydive Chicago. So I think that's important. Again, I'm going to touch base on opening procedures, and then we're actually going to practice some emergency procedures. All right. So last year's stats, we had 85 malfunctions on only 84 reserve events. So unfortunately, those should be even. All right. We should have 85 malfunction or 85 reserve runners with that. One thing with last year, it was a little bit more, but they said, is that too many malfunctions that you had? No, that's not too many malfunctions. Because you never know when you're going to have a malfunction. Whether it's your first jump, your fifth jump, you just had it repacked, it's your last one before you're going to go repack it, you should expect a malfunction on every skydive, okay? And I'm going to talk about expectation bias, but it'll help, having that mentality will help you overcome having that expectation bias. So I apologize for ahead of them. This is, the next slide might be a little emotional for some, but we go over a lot of stats, but I think it's good to put faces with stats because they're not just numbers, they're actual people. And unfortunately, over the last 17 years that I've been here at Skydive Chicago, we've had 5 fatalities that were due to improperly improperly or not performing their emergency procedures at all. And this isn't to call out these people, some of these people were my friends, but it's just kind of show that it can happen to anybody, all right? And because it's very easy just to look at numbers and dismiss it, okay? Until it's actually home. Give a little bit. Steph to upper left had a low cutaway and did not pull her reserve in time, and she impacted the line stretch. Gomi, basically his main entangled with his reserve, and it's assumed that he pulled both his, he pulled out of order or pulled at the same time. Reggie had line twists, and he spent over 28 seconds not doing anything with the line twist until impact. And then Breton had some issues with the slider, and then a toggle got unstowed at a low altitude, and he didn't have enough time to respond to it. Slow thing. The fifth one was a student that was on a level 1, and his brake was unstowed. The one thing with all these, and this is going back to the why, is I know every single one of these people up there knew how to do their emergency procedures. They were all very qualified to do it. Every single one of these people had over 1,000 skydives. 2 of them, Steph and Reggie, were on world record attempts or world record tryouts. They were at the top of their game. So I kind of asked this question because I think the USPA is looking at it. It's not just what happened, but why it's happening. Because everything should indicate that they knew exactly what they were doing, but for some whatever reason, they didn't respond to it. Okay? So the only best guess is that expectation bias. So expectation bias occurs when an individual expectations about an outcome influence the perceptions of one's own or others' behavior. In other words, the way I look at it is this can't be happening. And I myself, after we talked about looking at your own history and having humility to look back at yourself, I realized there was one particular circumstance that I think I had expectation bias. I was doing some training with a tandem. He and I actually told you guys about this the other day, but he pulled the toggles out too quickly based off of he misinterpreted information that I gave him. It ended up in line twist. I still remember to this day, this can't be happening. I can't. Okay, I'm at this new drop zone. I'm training this. I'm basically an evaluator, and now I'm under this line twists under a main, and there's nothing to get out. So I fought it. I tried to get out of it, and then I realized it's too low. Unfortunately, I didn't even know what the altitude was, but I knew internal clock it was too low, and then I had to train the student on how to cut away and pull the reserve. When I got to the ground, they mentioned, that was pretty low. And I was like, yeah, that was pretty low because I don't even remember how low I was. And at that point, I had like 7,000 skydives. I thought I knew what I was doing, right? But I had that expectation. It had worked so many times before. This can't be happening to me. And I think when you have that mentality, you're willing to fight a particular malfunction longer than you should be. Right? So I just kind of tell you to try to, so you know about expectation bias, and know how it can affect, and the fact that whether you have 50 jumps, 7 or 8,000 jumps, you should really be continuously learning. It kind of brings another, knowing your EPs is different from practicing. They're two different things. I know everybody here knows their EPs. They probably test you guys on it. But it's about practicing and being current with it. And so I did a little bit of research on what it is. I mean, there's tons of research on how to effectively practice, so we're going to just touch base on that. One, when you are practicing, you should be focusing on that. Put your phone away. You're not going to have your phone on. Well, you're not going to answer your phone on your skydive. Keep your, focus directly on what you're on your emergency procedures or whatever you're practicing. Simulate the malfunction. Again, a lot of this, the fight, flight, or fear, was due to the fact that they were under a stressful situation. And even though they practiced on the ground and they were able to perform it in that particular circumstances, they may have panicked due to the amount of stress that was going on. So try to put yourself in a situation. One, we have hanging harnesses here. I've trained a lot of different people. You do a leaning harness, and then you put them in a hanging harness and spin them around. A lot of times you get two very different reactions, okay? So get a point to get in a hanging harness and really get whipped around. Another thing that I've been personally doing is I get on a stationary bike or exercise, so I'm exerting energy, and then I was going over my emergency procedures. Just doing that, I realized my reaction time, my thought process was far different than me just sitting around doing my emergency procedures. So now I'm doing that more and more. I get on a stationary bike, I'm just going, and I've got my phone. I know you said don't have your phone, but I need to look at the malfunction and then going through those emergency procedures. Induce stress and practice with that. And hopefully, and we don't have it, that will maybe reduce the expectation bias or the panic response that a lot of people have been having. Oh, that was mine. The next thing is visualize. There's been a lot of studies that visualization can be just as successful as actually practicing. There's a study, you guys have probably heard about it, but Group A practiced doing one-handed shots for 2 weeks. Group B visualized practice one-handed shots. The intermediate and advanced people, which I consider you guys are licensed skydivers, intermediate and advanced, there was no difference. There was no improvement on either, or the improvement was the same between the two groups. Now I know that kind of contradicts my thing of practicing, but it goes in the fact that if visualization does just as much good as actually practicing, what's keeping you from practicing every single day? Every single day you should be practicing. Because it's easy, you can visualize. You can sit in bed, you can do it when you're working out, anything like that. And why do we need to practice every day? So what do we consider an expert? Do you think you guys are experts at cutting away or doing repeat procedures?
Just kidding.
So he probably is the most experienced. So good.
I'll own up to it. Yeah.
I have 9,000 skydives and 9 jumps. Okay, it's been like 2,000 or 3,000 jumps since I'm not very current on my jumps. We consider an A licensed jumper once they have 25 jumps, right? Like, so you probably heard the thing, oh, I have my A license in jumps. So we're not even A licensed jumpers on our jumps, okay? So, at least I hope you. Maybe how many jumps?
5.
5. Okay.
Yeah,
so
5.
He's only on jump 5. You know, like that can't be an AFF or an AFA. So the reason why I kind of put it in that perspective is it doesn't matter how many jumps that you have. We're not experts on chopping. There's probably a few out there that may be, but most of us are not. And that's why we have to practice so much to be able, so when we're in those stressful situations, we do perform the way we should. All right. So that now we're kind of going. I'm kind of changing bases, but it's something that I wanted to talk about. So looking at this, is this everybody's control? This is how you do your controllability check. Is it there? Is it square? Is it steerable? Just go ahead and right, so probably. Correct. Is this what everybody does, or is this? Do some people do this? Is it? Is it there square because it's usually one thing. Then I re-riser it so I can fly back home, right? Then I might stow my slider, put it down below my toggles. Maybe if you are doing it, loosen your chest strap. And then when it's all good, you unstow your brakes. Okay. So I did this for a long time until I looked at it and realized this is completely wrong. This is for the mere fact that stowing your slider, loosening your chest strap, and flying back home are not necessities. They're not necessities to land your parachute safely. All right? And I realized I was in that habit of doing it. I decided to do it different. So this is more like, and especially if you're flying higher performance parachutes, like if I immediately unstowed my brakes after is it there square and stow my brakes, I'd probably land off on every single skydive because it's coming out of the air. So this is kind of where it needs to happen. First of all, you check your altimeter. Is it there? Is it square? Cool. That's there. The second, if altitude permits, the first thing you should do is check your altimeter. Then, okay, I can re-riser it back home or heading back to the drop zone. Next thing, you're going to check your altimeter again. Am I above my decision altitude? If it's yes, then you can stow your slider and put it behind it if that's what you do. If you don't do it, you don't have to. But the one thing I don't recommend is once your brakes are unstowed, then trying to put your slider behind the parachute because that can induce a malfunction. If you still have time after all that, then unstow your brakes. Okay, that's in a perfect world. But at any point you're below your decision altitude, you abort stowing your slider, you abort flying back home because again it's not a necessity. You abort loosening your chest strap, and you go straight to unstow your brakes, and then you land your parachute. Does everybody understand that? again, I think I've talked to a lot of people and I realize a lot of people are doing it wrong. Everything, you can do it that way for a long time and you're going to get lucky until you have that one time when something doesn't go quite right and then you're going to be put in that situation. There's another video where a person, a very highly experienced person, was doing it the way I showed you guys before, and then they went to unscrew their brakes and realized they had a brake lock. So his chest strap's completely out. Now in the video, I couldn't find it. He's trying to tighten his chest strap as quickly as possible before he can cut away. It's obviously not a position that you want to be in, and that's why we do it in this way. All right? Any questions about that?
No, but I normally, like, I'll unstill my brakes, and then I'll proceed to undo my chest strap. Like,
Yeah. That is the way you should do it. Yep. You should never be unstilling your brakes after you loosen your chest strap. So, and that means if you're flying a high performance parachute, you have those few seconds of you're losing altitude. There's times I'm like, I'm not going to be able to loosen my chest strap, but I'm going to land safely to the next jump. Right? So just know, unsewing your chest strap, stowing your slider, whatever, removable slider, whatever you have, is always secondary to doing your controllability check, which includes installing your brakes and everything. Okay. So just to recap, again, don't delay, cut away. Effectively practice every single day, and have humility. Okay. Try to avoid that expectation bias. Again, which anybody can do. I've had it myself. All right, so with that, we're going to go back to the basics and just do emergency procedures, okay? So, actually, I'm going to move. Okay. So we're all going to stand up. So all I'm going to do is we're just going to, just like AFP. I know this is going to be a lot higher altitude, but I can't, 6,000 feet lock on, 5,500 feet wave arc pull. That's what altitudes we're going to be at. I know you guys usually don't pull that, but that's what I'm going to do. And then I want you to guys actually go through the motions and do how you want to do it. So whether it's a two-handed, you're going to look, grab, reach, peel, pull, look, grab, peel, pull, or if you do the single-handed one. All right, we're not in debate. The one thing I would recommend though is if you do a single-handed one, throw in a nice deep breath before you pull reserve. Okay, so cut away. I do recommend everyone do it. The only reason why I do this is just because of a tandem situation. But, all right, so 6,000 feet, 5,500 feet. All right, we get this. Yes, so everyone should be turning their wrist. Check your altimeter. All right, you're well above your decision altitude. What can you do? You can bicycle, you can pull. All right, let's start diving on you. Yep. So I like how the first thing you should do in there is check your altimeter. All right. It's going to determine. Okay, 6,000 feet, 5,500 feet. Cool. Yes, I saw most of you basically immediately went ahead and did that. Why didn't you try to get a kick out of line twist? It's not fully inflated. Great. Awesome. Yes. And you're going at a high rate of speed. That is a lot of line twists too. Falling fast. It's there, but it is far from square.
Would it still not be just a bad idea just to check it, even if he's still kind of cutting away a little?
I mean, yeah, you can. But if you've already made the decision. And again, as license, if you know you deployed at 5,000 or 4,000 feet, and you immediately got that, there is, you guys are licensed guys, there is a little bit of an internal clock, but you also have jitters too. Hopefully everybody's there. So 6,000 feet, 5,500 feet. All right, notice. this is what your parachute's going to look like for a couple seconds, because you know it cocoons out. But if it's there for more than 3-5 seconds, then that's a streamer. I've had one of these before. Just a side note, it's a very weird situation because you're in the harness, but you're falling at a very high rate of speed still. So there's a lot of pressure on your leg straps with that. And then obviously when you're about to go, you want to arch. It's actually a little bit difficult. So if you're ever in that, just realize really trying to punch out that arch and do your emergency procedures. So 6,000 feet, 5,500 feet. You get this. Sorry, I should make this say. Yes, it's a line over. All right. Good. If you have like your steering line over an incel, you could potentially grab and pull down once. Okay. If clear, no more than once, really. I mean, two things. If it's not clear, it's probably not going to clear, and the more you pull on it, you're just damaging your canopy even more. Okay. Other thing is say the incels, because if it's anywhere in the center there, you're not going to clear. It's just not going to happen. So save yourself the altitude and time for like 4%. So 6,000 feet, 5,500 feet. This. I heard it up here. Do you guys, what was that malfunction?
Broken lines.
Broken lines, yeah. How many have had broken lines? All right. I've had a couple. They're very hard to see. All right. Sometimes you don't even know until like it's flying straight, and then you unsell your brakes, and then something crazy weird happens. So again, another appearance that controllability checks and getting your brakes unstowed so above your decision altitude. What if you have? You could if you have one broken line, and you decide because it goes back and forth. If you have a broken line, it's not your steering line or anything like that. You could potentially land it. If you decide that you think you can do that, though, you'll need to have the altitude to maximum performance trims. You guys all know what maximum performance trims are. You should have done it. Yep. So if you have any damage like that or that, you're going to do a hard right, hard left, maybe in a flare. You're maxing out your parachute as much as possible. You're putting stress on the canopy and those lines, and then you assess it. If the hole's getting bigger, or if the lines are broken or anything like that, then you know you need to cut away and pull the reserve. Or to be honest, if it passes and you just don't feel great about it, cut away and pull the reserve. Because one of the things, if you have a broken line or a hole, there's probably damage that you're unforeseen damage that you don't know. So just keep that in mind. You know, sometimes you're on a bonfire or something like, oh, I landed that thing. Like, that's not a point of pride. That's a point of luck that you have. To kind of go on like personal experiences, I had a malfunction. It was line twist, and I was at my decision altitude. I only had one line twist, Do you? Totally jumped again. If you only have one more line twist and you're at decision altitude, do you try to get out of it, or do you cut away and pull the reserve? Cut away and pull the reserve. Yes. My personal experience is I had that. I cut away and pulled the reserve. I only had one line twist. But then once I found my canopy and I got it back, I realized why my canopy was so crappy that inducing it. I had broken lines. So if I would have said, oh, I only got one more, got it, then what I would have done, I would have unstowed my brakes and then had a hell of a time after that and at a much lower altitude. All right? So that, again, going back to the controllability check and doing all that above your decision. All right? So 6,000 feet, 5,500 feet. All right, I'm not even going to point to anything. Nothing's coming out. Cool. I saw two different ones, cutaway, pull the reserve. I also just saw reserve. Both of those are correct responses, okay? I'm not going to get into debate in which one because that'll take another 3 or 4 hours. But the one thing that I do recommend is whatever you decide, you're licensed skydivers, practice that way. A pilot shoot and tow or a container lock is a high-speed malfunction, you don't have time to think about, well, what did he say, or, oh, man, you know, like, you need to have that debate and that decision here on the ground. Don't do it here. So again, cool. Some of you pull the reserve, some of you just cut away. It's totally fine, but practice that way. Make that decision here so it's automatic upstairs.
So like you pull, nothing feels with it. It'd be a good idea just to look back in case it's like a horseshoe or something. Because then you pull your main right away and you have a bunch of like.
Well, if you threw your main or you threw your pilot shoe, then you don't have a horseshoe.
No, or like I mean like I'm not function where like I don't know, like just some stuff is.
So he's saying if his pilot shoe gets stuck in his burble.
Or something.
Okay, so you throw the container's closed, but it just stands around.
Yeah, you still have stuff in your bag.
Yes, you can look over your shoulder. You can give it a little nudge, yeah, but make that part of. Are you going to do a whole lot of that? No, because you're burning altitude. So again, when your practice is way reach throw, cool, nothing's coming out, bang, bang, nothing, cut away, full reserve. And practice doing it that way.
There are skydivers who actually grab the bridle.
There have been skydivers that got lucky and did that. That's correct.
I mean, just normally, that's how they deploy all the time.
What? No, I think you're getting confused. That's a pull-out system.
Okay.
So it's a. So what they do is there's a little bridle, so to speak, that's connected to the pin. So they literally just pull it out, and that pulls the pin.
Yeah, that's.
They don't actually reach back and grab.
No.
Yeah. So.
Hey guys, and I will say from my 5 experiences last, so all of them were line twists. I started diving in my canopy. The first time I had to cut away, there was a big delay. Like I knew I had line twists, but then I had like this fear, and like time definitely slows down. But I took way longer to chop than I should have. But it wasn't until chop 3, same malfunction, did I finally get awareness of like, okay. And that was the first time I was like, what's my altitude? Can I fight this? So I said, nope, I can't chop. So we talk about in theory that, hey, yeah, check your altitude. That's probably not going to happen. Unless like you're super experienced or you're like expecting it to happen or you're a test jumper. Because it got me, and like, I'm a really paranoid skydiver. Like when I first got into jumping, I was scared of it, like terrified. And I don't know, I just always expected, even always like being paranoid and expecting it, I didn't really develop an awareness until like chop number 3. Yeah.
So again,
so it takes time, and then
yeah. Well, like it was mentioned before, like again, he's the most experienced, and that's not that. I mean, now we have experiences like that he can share on with that. One thing with it, because there was last year during Summerfest, there was somebody. It wasn't a local jumper, a visiting jumper. It took a long time to chop because the jump before they said, oh, you could have done that better. And I want to touch base on that. That is not the mentality, and that's not the community that we want. To give example, there was a student years ago that chopped because their slider wouldn't go back up. Okay? So with that information, did they do the right thing? Sliding, everyone the slider doesn't go back up, right? So, and they chop it. Should we tell them that, oh, you shouldn't chop for that?
No.
They did the right thing. The reasoning why I said they did the right thing, because at that moment, they didn't think their parachute was working, so they performed their emergency procedures. Now, there's some education that would go along after that fact, but just nobody ever chops is wrong for chopping, unless they perfectly know that it wasn't a malfunction. That would be the wrong reason. But it doesn't matter why a person. I mean, I asked people, lots of people, 84 times last year. So why did you chop? The most common answer, I don't know, it was a pile of shit. It wasn't working. Great, that's awesome. You performed your job correctly. All right. So when people do have chops and everything, you keep that one in the community with them. That it doesn't matter if it's your first chop, 4th chop, 10th chop, or whatever. At that particular moment, it wasn't a functioning parachute, and they did everything right to save their lives. Cool. Questions? Yeah.
Now that straight chop, so
Say that again. I've had 3 jumps.
Okay.
Last 2 I've got on video. One was the step through. And it was a case of taking the, steering, but is it still going to steer at 500 feet? Bang. And the last one was top skin tap. So this canopy I've had for thousands of jumps is starting to turn left for some reason. It's going up. And it was only when the sun got behind it I could see the top skin at the top. And there's like a microsecond between that and Cheerio not even dealing with it because, it's a...
Yeah. Again, you talked about the step through. There was fatality this year because they had a step through and then they
could land it.
There was an accident here a couple of years ago where it was a step through. Thought they can landed it and he broke his ankle on landing. So, any question?
Yeah. What's a step through?
So a step through is basically like when it usually happens when you put your canopy down. You go up and like the nose or whatever is just or like if you take the your container and you flip it.
So it's like
It's like having home inside out.
Is this when your canopy
Is that like?
Yes. So the final thing, because this is the end, I have a personal goal, or the SNTA, I'm going to split this up, putting at least 100 licensed jumpers through emergency procedures, okay? So with that, I recommend that everybody, whether it's tonight, tomorrow, the weather looks like crap, great time to come down here, pull some handles. We got some great stuff. We got the hanging harness there. We can spin you around. If you want to bring your own rig down here, we can hook you up to that. It takes a little second. You can even hook your 3 rings up to that, and you can cut away your own rig. Otherwise, we do have leaning harnesses, okay? So again, I have a personal goal to put at least 100, or the SNC put at least 100 licensed skydivers. Help me fulfill that goal and do your emergency procedures.
And then stuff Easter eggs.
And stuff Easter eggs. I did 5 yesterday, so I got 95 more. 95 more. All right, thank you guys very much. If you guys want to stay down here, more questions, or if you want to get into a harness, I'm down here. Yes, yes, Rob.
So did you ship it back yet? Shipped it yet?
Crossfire 30.
What's up, bro? Good to see ya.
Yeah.
Hell yeah. What was that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I did want to share that. I try to tell people.
Never been mistaken. My first one.
If I had more time, I'd go into that thought process, which was like, oh man, line twist. Oh, that's funny. Oh no, my
That was good. Bro. Good. How about you? Hi. First. These are all good.
Yeah,
CJ's not
one.
on CJ's not on.
I didn't get to it, but no, for sure. No, yeah.
Don't worry about it. Do your fair. Call it even. Whatever. It's fine. It's fine. Yeah, he said something about the weather. He's trying to get all kinds of shit booked. Me and him got crazy all of a sudden. We booked Sebastian, we're doing a hanging camp, and Leslie. So that's in like 2 weeks. But just trying to get in place, Airbnbs and flights and this and that. And then on top of that, then we booked Utah like a month from today. You can see it. So right in 2 weeks when we get back from Sebastian, we're going to Utah. Fucking 5 hours apiece. That's insane. I've been there twice. Both times I've only done 2 hours. 2 hours. I can only imagine why. But we'll put the firecracker in my hand.
Yeah, started back in November.
We went last night. There was some dudes there, older dudes. Late 50s that each did 6 hours. They were doing an hour a day while we were doing it. And like I was there feet up, sore. I couldn't say nothing. Because these old guys were doing more than us, you know what I'm saying? So I was just keeping my mouth shut.
No, every once in a while.
But long story short, they were like, they had a lot of jumps. Just trying to learn how to do it. I mean, I was like that about it. And I'm friends with him on Facebook. He just went back again and did 4.5 more. And he posted like a video where he's at. And there, dude, he fucking blew it. And like, it pissed me off when I see it. I was just like, motherfucker. So immediately I called him. I was like, dude, I'm going. I don't know if you're coming with me. I'm going. I was like, I'm doing 5 fucking hours. 5. And Mark's just like, all right, man, I'm out. All right. Doing it. Got a little better discount because I was able to, I essentially bought 10 hours. And Mark's going to be using mine. So I got 5. $750 an hour. I know if you just bought an hour straight up, it's like essentially $100 cheaper. If you just did 1 hour, if you buy 5 hours, it's a little cheaper. 10 hours, more cheaper. 10 hours, it's $750. $100 an hour. And then I think it's 5 hours, or 5 hours, it's like a $50. So it'd be like $80 an hour. No, it's impossible. You couldn't do that. They recommend 40 minutes a day. You can do an hour. You got to be in shape already. The problem is when you don't know, you don't know. Like, for instance, you can learn it. Trying to hold your arms. Once you start rotating more and getting better at sitting, you're not using your shoulders. You're learning to fly with your legs more, and then you're like, your shoulders don't get big. Now all of a sudden you're head down. Now your shoulders going the other way. On top of like your back leg being curled.
Yeah, she needs like some orange tape on those things because everyone is about to step on those.
I know. It almost got destroyed when we first started. Yeah.
Quad on one side and a hamstring on the other. But now I know, like this whole next month, I'm going next month, this whole next month. Yeah. I'm going to be legs all the time, I'm going to be on a stationary leg, and you got to be primed. You got to be ready. it's kind of like going to the gym when you haven't done anything in forever and you're so sore the next day. Versus if you're doing it, you just got to be ready.
Coming out of the hole, you're like, oh, your shoulders are wide.
Oh, yeah, everything. It's cool though when the more stuff you learn, it's cool that you like rotate through. So it's cool now. Now, like where I'm at in the tunnel now is I'll go and fly head down, and they'll just keep working head down with me until I get tired. And once I get tired, I'll roll into a sit. Basically signal them, and then we'll just work on sit. So it's different muscles. Yeah. Now once I'm okay, then I had a break.
Come on over. We have one more presentation, and then we've got cake and prizes.
Ooh. Oh yeah, we'll grab a seat over here. Oh.
All right. So for those of you who didn't hear, we've got one last presentation. You guys have been doing a really great job all evening. I know it's kind of a lot to sit and listen to all at once, but I think it's really important. So the special presentation today I'm doing, it's about community and mental wellness. So I think that mental wellness is a really important part of safety. It kind of happens in the campground, it happens on our jumps, and it's really important to be primed kind of in all of those situations to be safe for our jumping and for each other. So disclaimers, because I'm going to be talking about mental health. Any information in this presentation is for informational purposes only. I'm not a doctor. I'm not trying to practice medicine. And so this is not medical advice. Please talk to your actual doctor. Also, it's going to list resources and things like that on these slides. At the end, there is going to be a QR code that all of you guys can use. I recommend all of you guys use it so that way you have access to all these slides. So you don't need to worry about taking pictures or anything during it. You all have access to this information. But we're not providing healthcare, medical, or nutritional therapy services, and we're not trying to prevent or cure any physical, mental, emotional issues or diseases. I wanted to talk about community. So we have one of the biggest and best drop zones in the world. We have over 220 acres, over 150 campground slots. And so that experience can look like, particularly for tandems, recent AFP graduates, or jumpers new to SDC who perhaps didn't come from this size facility, think of what that can feel like. It can be really intimidating, it can be really overwhelming, it can be really lonely. So tandems, they're walking in, signed up for the scariest thing that they've ever done in their life. They walk into the hangar and they're completely lost. They see a bunch of fun jumpers around. It says registration really large in front of them, but they might not see it because of everything else that's going on. So if you, as the fun jumper, see that situation, go and talk to them. Help bring them to the manifest office. If you're coming in from a jump and there are 10 tandems there that just watched you land and they're super stoked and you're the coolest thing they've ever seen because you're a skydiver, go talk to them for 5 minutes. Let them ask you questions and you can answer all those simple questions. So that's part of getting more people in the community and getting people connected. We all say that we start this sport because skydiving is awesome, but we stay in this sport because of the community, right? We stay in it because of the relationships that we build. So that starts with the tandem experience. And same for AFP graduates. They kind of have a nice, safe classroom downstairs. They get to know 3 instructors really well. And then they graduate and the instructors are like, cool, you can't hang out in here anymore. So when they come out to the packing mat, talk to them. If it's a new face, or maybe you've seen them at Tiki, or maybe you've seen them here in the Sky Lounge, talk to them and answer again kind of any questions that they have, or just get to know them and make them feel welcome in the community and give them that next step. Because we do graduate quite a few AFP students, and even in the industry overall, we graduate students and then we kind of lose them. So somebody just put $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 down into this sport, and then if they don't immediately feel connected to anybody or don't have a friend or someone to go to, then we lose them right away. So welcome those AFP graduates. And then jumpers new to SDC, so again, we have a pretty big drop zone. If you're from SDC, this is what you're used to. But a lot of drop zones have little Cessnas or even a Caravan, and they don't have, how many hangars do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 hangars now. Like they're not used to the scene. So if Summerfest is the first time they walk in and they didn't come with any friends, like they're looking at 500 people packing in front of them and they don't know where to start. So that all starts with us. Like, we're from SDC, and so we need to welcome and reach out to those people and not make sure that people don't get lost because of our size. So kind of broader picture, like relationships are critical to skydiving, to the SDC experience, skydiving overall, and also our overall health. So our relationships, our community, is one of the most important like protective aspects that we have in terms of mental wellness and things like that. So I'm kind of going to switch into that here. So I'm going to talk about our brain on skydiving. I'm going to talk about kind of the chemical reaction that we have in our brain. Endorphins, which has a pain relieving effect. So that's the euphoric, like feel good feeling. So you'll hear runners talk about getting releasing endorphins when they go for a run. So it helps you cope with pain and stress. You also release adrenaline, which is also epinephrine, or known as epinephrine. So that is when you see something exciting or threatening, which, by the way, if something is scary or something is exciting, you're having the same physiological response to both of those. Like, the same thing is happening in your body. It just depends on how you perceive. So, like, we think skydiving is exciting, that's why we do it. Some people think it's really scary, and that's why they refuse to do it. So, but that's actually the same effect in your body. So that's adrenaline, epinephrine, increases your heart rate, increases mental clarity, and increases reaction time, so that way you can handle intense situations. Dopamine, some people kind of think of it as the happy hormone, but it's actually more equivalent to motivation. So it's like motivation to pursue more pleasure-inducing activities. So it's also related to movement and memory, and really this feeling of wanting. So it gives you the motivation to go after something that you want. Serotonin is more of the actual happy hormone, so that moderates mood and positive feelings, increased focus and cognition, regulation of sleep and anxiety, calm, and that's your content feeling of having. So that's when you're like very happy with what you have. So all of these chemicals, along with chemicals that I haven't listed here, have a natural baseline in your brain. Like, some people's natural baseline is a little bit higher, and they're more motivated, and they're more energetic on a regular daily basis. And there are some people that are a little bit more chill, and it takes more to get them motivated and going. And everybody has a different natural baseline, kind of depending on a lot of things. It's influenced by genetics, behaviors, sleep, nutrition, like dopamine and epinephrine. So the levels of other brain chemicals. So for example, epinephrine is made from dopamine. So if you have a low level of dopamine, you're going to have a lower level of epinephrine potentially. So also things like history and trauma. There's more and more information coming out about trauma. Even in particular, like it's starting to look more like the first 2 months of your life, and kind of how your parents or caretakers interacted with you during those first 2 months really builds how your brain interacts with people for the rest of your life. So it could be, history or trauma that you're aware of, not aware of. It could be something that happened to you recently that was really traumatizing. So all of those things can potentially change the baseline of your brain. And so in general, our body is trying to constantly stay at that baseline. So when we do something like skydiving or drugs or anything like that where our brain chemicals go up significantly, your body's going to respond to that, and the natural reaction is to go below the baseline. So just be aware that our body's constantly trying to maintain homeostasis, so that way it's trying to keep everything back to that baseline. So, talking about some dysregulators, so what I mean, those are the things that either shoot your brain chemicals really high or really low, are alcohol. So alcohol has an extremely negative effect, particularly on sleep, but also on a lot of other bodily functions. So alcohol can dysregulate your system. Drugs, obviously there are uppers, there are downers, all of those are going to affect your brain chemicals, and your body's going to, after you use them, your body's going to want to get back to normal, or it's going to want to use them again, so that way you don't get that swing in the terrible, like, bad direction. So lack of sleep, like I said, sleep is extremely important for regulating everything. That's kind of your body's time, or your brain's time, to like clear out all of the bad stuff and integrate all of the good stuff that happened, or really make understanding of your day. Stress, that can be, you know, work stress, it can be relationship stress, it can be stress from a lot of different sources. Like I said, trauma, it can be recent, it can be past. Being in an insecure environment, so that can be something as obvious as abusive or harassment, but also something kind of, you know, maybe not as obvious as discrimination. So there could be underlying levels of discrimination that you're not even consciously aware of, but if you're dealing with it day after day, that can have overall like a negative effect that you might not be consciously aware of. Financial or food insecurity, living in an unsafe area, again, even if nothing has actually happened to you, if you are kind of scared or prepared to be attacked every time you walk to your car because you live in an unsafe area, that's also going to have a dysregulating effect overall. Nutrition, it's kind of just now, there's a lot more research is coming out about how what we eat really has an effect on our brain. You actually have more neurons. They work slightly differently. Hi, KB. Come on in. Yeah, so there's a lot more information coming about how like our gut directly communicates with our brain, and how they're all trying to balance the chemicals together. Like your gut makes a lot of hormones. So nutrition is very important, and we currently nowadays tend to eat a lot of overprocessed stuff. Eat things that are nutritionally poor, but they're called hyperpalatable foods, so they taste really good, and you want to keep eating them, and they're really hard to stop eating, but they're not actually providing you with that much nutrients. And excessive sugar, so also being overweight can have a dysregulating effect for a lot of different reasons, like you metabolize stuff differently. And social media is also dysregulating. Like you hear about nowadays all these, like, they kind of focus on teenage girls, but it really affects all of us, how you're just, like social media, you're constantly getting that tiny dopamine hit, so that way you want to keep looking at it. It makes us unhappy with the situations that we're in, depending upon the stuff that you're looking at, but it can make us unhappy with the situations we're in, and we're constantly like, feel like the grass is always greener on the other side. So, but on a happier note, there are lots of things we can do to kind of regulate our system. So even if you decide to drink alcohol or do other things that potentially, or skydive, that could potentially dysregulate your system, there are lots of habits and kind of lifestyle choices you can put into place that will help kind of bring that body back to a good state. So sleep. A lot of the information that I got is from Andrew Huberman, who is he's a professor at Stanford University of neurology. And he says like the best nootropic. I looked up how to say that beforehand, but so those are like brain supplements like you take so your brain works better. So the best stress relief, best trauma relief, best immune booster, best hormone augmentation, which is like make it more efficient and work better, best emotional stabilizer. Like all of those things are sleep. So having good sleep habits and getting good quality sleep, not just the length of sleep, but getting good quality sleep, is so important for all of your body systems. So some quick things you can do. You're supposed to go to bed at the same time each day and wake up at the same time each morning. I know that's really hard. People don't usually do it on a weekend, but if there's a 6-hour difference between your weekend and your weekdays, like that's going to have a hugely kind of negative effect on, because by the time you actually get back into a good schedule by Friday, then it's the weekend again. So your body's constantly doing this. Viewing morning sunlight, so within 30 to 60 minutes of waking up, if you actually go outside without sunglasses on or anything like that, don't obviously look directly at the sun, but if you kind of get some morning sunlight in your eyes, that will immediately set your circadian rhythm, so that way it'll help you fall asleep more regularly that evening. And also no lights between 10 p.m. and 4 a.m. So like even looking at your phone or watching TV in the dark, any of those things, like that's going to significantly decrease your dopamine for the next day if you are looking at those bright lights between 10 p.m. and 4 a.m. There's some other things you can do if you work shift work or anything like that, but in general. Whole nutrition, so eating protein, healthy fats, fibers. So you want protein, carb, and fat basically with every meal. Eat lots of colors, eat real food. Like the ingredient list, you should be able to pronounce everything on the ingredient list. Reduce sugar. Hydration, super important, especially for mental clarity. And gut health, kind of like eating things like kombucha and fermented foods and kimchi and that sort of thing. Physical activity, so this is my undergraduate degree is in kinesiology, so I could talk about this for a very long time, but it's been found to be, it's an effective antidepressant. Like, I don't know if anybody watches Joe Rogan, but I just found out that he said something about, there was an Australia study that said it was like physical activity was 1.5 times more effective than actual antidepressant medication or therapy. So I'm not recommending not taking your antidepressants or stopping therapy, but it is very effective. It's a good stress reliever. It's also very protective against a lot of diseases, including cardiovascular disease, diabetes, Alzheimer's. I did my senior thesis on diabetes and physical activity, and they found that people with type 2 diabetes, if they did one bout of physical activity, for 24 hours, they're basically asymptomatic of the disease. So it just has a hugely protective effect on our future selves, on our current selves. Support networks, so as I kind of talked about at the beginning, community is super important. Friends, family, having that person, whether it be, your sister or your best friend, like having somebody that you can talk to and like let them know how you feel. And they totally respond in understanding, not even necessarily giving you advice, but just hearing you. Security, that includes the emotional, physical, financial security, feeling safe where you're at. Meditation, breathing, and tapping are all kind of methods that can help you get a direct kind of quote-unquote hack, but you can get a direct link to like your vagus nerve. So basically it can just, your parasympathetic nervous system is the system that like calms you down. Your sympathetic nervous system is the one that keys you up. Your parasympathetic nervous system can be directly impacted by the breathing. Like if you take a certain breathing pattern, it will immediately activate that calming system down. And that's just by taking, a couple breaths with a certain pattern. So that's an immediate way to get a calming reaction in your body. And if you practice that over time, especially things like meditation, like there are lots of other positive benefits that they're just kind of starting to look at. So these are just some apps that I've heard of or used. There's one called Calm, there's one called Balance, there's one called Insight Timer, there's one called Reverie. There's lots of things that'll help you get into that, and you can do like 2 minutes of meditation a day. And even that practice is going to have significantly positive effects. So counseling, obviously going to therapy, talking to a professional person who can help you, and they're going to give you a lot more tools than I'm giving you right now. A cold shower or bath, that's also getting more popular kind of in the media, but it's creating significant resilience in your body, which is the ability to kind of bounce back from a stressful activity. And it has, even if you take like a 2-minute bath or 2-minute shower and as cold of water as you can stand comfortably, you will have significant like increases in your dopamine for 3, 4, 5 hours that day. So that's another like quick way that you can kind of do good things for your body. So the bottom line, skydiving causes a complex and exciting cocktail of brain chemicals to be released, but that can be associated with a dysregulating effect on our daily lives. So if you or someone that you know like doesn't feel well, like just know that you're not alone. There are reasons for this, and like there are resources for you. So the next few slides I'm going to go over are kind of mental health resources. Again, there's going to be a QR code at the end, so if you just want to take a picture at the end or save the website, save this PDF. And then, because even if you don't have any issues, the person next to you probably does, or you might find somebody in the campground that does, or you might find somebody in your family that does. Like, this is something everybody's kind of struggling with. So yeah, I do just want to go over some resources since we are not doctors. But so overall, like, if your leg is broken, right, you're not going to come to us, you're not going to come to Anthony, you're not going to come to me to fix it. Like, we're not medical doctors. So if you're depressed or you have any thoughts of suicide or any issues with substances, like, we are happy to be there for you to listen about it, but there are people out there to help you. Like, we are not the doctors, we cannot fix that, but there are lots of resources for you. So substance and abuse, mental health services, or you can now text too. So this is really like a treatment referral routing service. So if you have either substance abuse issues or mental health services, they can kind of point you in the right direction for local treatment facilities, support groups, and community-based organizations. The Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, which used to be the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. Again, you can call, you can text. They have an online chat. This one I like because it's 24/7, it's free, and it's confidential, which most of them are. But it's not only for people in suicidal crisis or emotional distress, but also their friends or family. So if you have a friend that you're really concerned about, you can call this number and they'll tell you what to do. So it'll help you find a therapist, or I guess their recommendations are like, and they'll help you through these steps, are finding a therapist, building a support network, using your support network, and making a safety plan. These are all online therapy resources. So if you don't know where to find a therapist, and especially in skydiving, like, we typically don't necessarily live in the same place all year long. So I think finding an online therapy option is really helpful, because then no matter where you are, you can still sign up for when you need to do therapy with your person. So these are all options. We don't have any affiliation with any of the listings included. We're not suggesting one over the other. They're in alphabetical order. Most of these, they'll ask you a bunch of questions, like, before you like, to see what kind of therapy you need, and to kind of narrow down the options for something that's right for you. Some of these, like, you can just pay out of pocket. They're the cost of 2 lift tickets, right, for one session. So yeah, these are really good options. And then a lot of them also accept insurance too. So whether you have insurance or don't have insurance or underinsured or whatever, like, one of these options I'm sure will work for you. Sometimes it takes more than one. It usually takes like more than one, like trying more than one therapist to find one that works for you. So if you find if you meet with a therapist for one session and you didn't really like it, then try a different therapist. Like, it's fine. You can try a couple of them to find one that really like resonates with you.
Or try multiple times, because the first time is not always comfortable.
Yeah, that's a good point too. So she said, yeah, or make sure that you can try the same therapist a couple times, multiple times, because the first session is probably going to be awkward anyways, right? So I think this is the last resource that I had, but CDC also has a lot of stuff on their website, and they specifically will kind of lead to things more related to crisis, abuse, assault, and violence. If you're LGBTQ, older adults or veterans, active duty military, finding treatment and opioid treatment. They also have a campaign that's going on right now called How Right Now, and their website, like, you go to, the campaign, I guess, is designed to strengthen emotional well-being and resiliency, but you go to their website and it's basically like, how are you feeling right now? And if they have a bunch of options, you say how you're feeling right now, and then it'll kind of tell you like why you're feeling that way and give you resources related to that feeling. So yeah, overall, we want you guys to take care of yourselves, so that way you can be there for your friends, so that way we can be there for each other, and together we can appreciate 2023. So yeah, this is a QR code for everyone. Like I said, I recommend kind of everyone put it in your phone, because even if you don't need anything right now, good resource to look on later for your friends. And we have raffle stuff now. Woo! All right. Yeah. I'll leave this up for like 2 more seconds. So, thanks. I started to get a little too nerdy. I was like, okay. All right, so first I'm going to have Jesus come up because he started this new company called Grand Theft Auto. Yeah, I like it. I mean, the shirts are really cool, but. All right, maybe we can turn on the lights. Yeah. All right. No. We can probably turn off.